Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we're going to have live viewer call-ins via Skype, basically any time that you want. We will have the usual Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics for where I live, and we'll talk about whether or not it's time to break up the United States. I'll also have a brief review this time around of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 4, Forget Me Not. And we'll probably also have some updates about the election and other things that may come up. Now, this is a live stream, so even if I'm not able to get to you via Skype, you're free to chat with me about anything that you want in the chat box. You can basically ask me any question, whether it's political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without YouTube ranking my channel and videos even lower than it already does, the Civil War II, the election, or even things relating to fantasy, science fiction, horror, and other superhero and stuff-related genres. I'll answer each and every question in detail and as much truthfully as I possibly can. There are some personal subjects that I won't discuss, but pretty much anything else is fair game. I'll get to as many of my viewers as I possibly can, with the understanding that I don't really want this to go much longer than about 3 hours. I am an old man with lower back arthritis, and I've taken some steps that seem to help quite a lot sitting in this chair, because I was able to actually sit here for 6 straight freaking hours 2 days ago. What a nightmare. If you'd like to call into the show, I'm doing it via Skype. Since I don't really want to give out all of my Skype information in public, I'm going to do this way. If you're interested in talking with me directly and having everybody hear you, send me an email to callin@sylranch.tv. Give me all of your Skype information. I'll Skype you back. You'll then be able to talk to me about anything that you want. You can agree with me, disagree with me, call me names, anything you want. So again, if you're interested in talking with me directly and having everybody hear your voice, email me at callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and I'll Skype you back. And that email address again is callin@sylranch.tv. Hey, Drop of Truth, nice to see you here tonight. No one's getting any younger, Billy says, yeah. But if you know how to recapture youth, then let me know. Well, I'll do this. You promise to do the same for me. Yeah, recapture youth and get rid of a little bit of the spare tire I'm hanging around. Oh, God, the U.S. elections, what a complete debacle. Oh, God, yeah. The only thing you can say about it really is there is clearly quite a lot of voter fraud going on. It seems to be mostly on the Democratic side of the world. The best thing I can do, I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, the best thing I can do to point you to some real good proof on that is Project Veritas on YouTube. They have done some excellent work in terms of finding places that you don't expect there to have been any voter fraud, like in the Postal Service. It may be somewhat widespread. Nobody's quite sure yet. But boy, have they done just a champion's amount of work in terms of finding various voter fraud around the country. And looking at what we've got now, I don't think you can say that anything other than voter fraud is what's going on. I'm not sure you can even make sense of it anymore. I'm not sure that the only thing to do for it isn't a new election, run rather differently this time. I mean, there's all sorts of lawsuits and things in process, but God, it's such a nightmare. I don't know how you figure it all out. I don't know how you know who has voted for whom. It's insanity. Yes, Drop of Truth, James O'Keefe has definitely got the goods. Yeah, I don't care if you think and there's people who think James O'Keefe is not a real journalist. Let me tell you something. James O'Keefe is doing the same type of journalism work that Woodward and Bernstein were doing with Richard Nixon. The regular press, does not like it, but that is a fact. And in fact, he's gotten 150 or something like that retractions from the regular press when they've said negative things about him and then had to retract it. You can't look at that and say, oh, he's making it up. He's got people on video. He's got undercover video of people. You can't say that he's doing, he's got it. He's got it. Period. He's got it. So, anyway, starting off a little bit here. The answer now to the question that nobody asked. Here are the this week's virus statistics for Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live. Source for this always is in my description box below. Very, very good source if you want to learn about Nebraska virus statistics. Drop Truth is saying Watergate, yet another U.S. political snafu. Oh, yes. This one's worse. This is way worse. As I say, the source for this is in my description box. It's a great one if you want to see statistics about the state of Nebraska, individual counties. Generally, caution you, it defaults to the 14-day view. Go to the total view because that's a little more revealing. 14-day tell you something about maybe how it spread a little bit, but there's so little of it. It's hard to, you could say, oh, we had a 100% increase in cases. Well, that means like 2 cases. So the statistics this week, as always, the total Lancaster County population remains roughly the same at 319,090 people. Total Lancaster County tests are at 98,008, which is up 7 from last week. And always remember that this isn't necessarily representative of, a percentage of the population, because a single test isn't going to trigger other COVID tests, the virus tests. So it's not really a percentage of the population. The total Lancaster County positive tests is at 10,092, which is up about 1,111 from last week. This represents actually the first real spike in positive cases that we've seen, and that's a spike just simply because the number of tests really hasn't increased that much. The total number of Lancaster County deaths is at 49, up 4 from last week, and it corresponds to the increased number of positive tests. Deaths as a percentage of total tested is at 0.050%, which is up about 0.003% from last week. It is statistically identical. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is 0.486, which is decreased actually by 0.677% from last week. This is actually a significant decrease because last week was 1.136%, drops it down much closer to the roughly 0.3% that we'd been enjoying previously. And deaths as a percentage of population is 0.0154%, which is up 0.013% from last week, and it corresponds to the increased number of deaths. But again, you're still talking about a number that has to be expressed to 3 significant digits that goes 4 digits past the 0. Let's see. Drop of Truth is saying has Nebraska undergone daylight savings time? Bring forward the ball back. Yes, we have. That's why it's 9 p.m. here where I'm at. We fell back 1 hour. It's something that's left over from when the country was largely rural. And so the thinking was if you did this time change, it would sort of officially give people more daylight when you're out in a place where, your only source of illumination is the big glowing ball in the sky. These days, I don't think it needs to be done at all, partly because people tend to work in office jobs a lot. And even if you're out and, living somewhere rural and you have to worry about that big glowing ball in the sky, there's really no reason you can't just get up an hour earlier. You're going to do it anyway. It's just a rather holdover from something. It is 14:08 Friday in Australia now. Well, it's still Thursday here. Still a day ahead of us, so... Well, let me look here and see what I've got for a number of viewers. I can't tell. This thing often lies to me. Lies, and lies. Tell you what, while it seems to be lying to me, or maybe it's not, maybe I don't have that many viewers, instead of going straight up to the stuff I'm going to talk about with the potentially breaking up of the United States, let me go ahead and go to my review of Star Trek Discovery Season 1, Episode 4. Remember Me Not, or whatever the hell it is. Well, I tell you, watching this show has become something where you kind of want to wear a mask, just to avoid the STDs. I'm not going to wear this throughout the entire review, but this, if you don't know, this is my actual mask. This is what I wear when I'm in public. This has been approved by my doctor. Said that yes, it covers my mouth, covers my nose, and this, in fact, this is not a functional thing. It just sits in here. But it does trap all of my breath in here. It's such that if I go out and do something and like getting groceries and stuff, I start to get really hot from all the warm air that I'm breathing in and out of myself. So this is what I wear because our governor has put a mask order in place that doesn't really need it. And so this is my way of being sort of passive-aggressive about it. But in any case, the review of Star Trek Discovery, it's got a name, its initials for most fans are STD. This will protect you from an STD. But it's getting to the point where I kind of feel like I want to watch it. Marshall says, Narfel the Garthok, I'm not sure what that's, is that my mask? Robert says, you haven't seen it yet, is it that bad? Well, I'm not going to give away too many spoilers on this one. It's a relatively short review. Well, I'll just explain what I think about it. And the U.S. electoral insanity is just plain insanity. So on this review of episode 4, Marshall is saying, doesn't overly bother me. The Senate didn't flip, so the left's crazy ideas will hit a roadblock. There's that. Yes, there is that. I think we have bigger problems. I'll talk about that in a bit. So this episode, well, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5, but you have to remember my scale on this because of my scale. My expectations are lower than dinosaur bones. 1 is existentially threateningly bad, projectile vomiting, your internal organs failing, things like that. With 5 being passable, so 2 out of 5 isn't saying a hell of a lot. What worked? I always like to try to find something that went well. The visuals were very, very pretty. One thing that's nice about modern special effects and having more money than God is that you can show alien planets that look rather alien, and the Trill planet looked fairly alien, so I have to hand them to that. Drop 2 says you can't spoil manure. Yeah, well, no kidding. What didn't work? I'm not going to go over a whole hell of a lot of this, but the direction was annoying to me. The direction was by Hanel M. Culpepper, who has previously done work on this, but what really annoyed me was when they were doing reverse shots. Now, that's where you have 2 people in frame, like one here who will be in front of me. You'll see their back, and you see my face. And then they'll do a reverse shot where, they have a line, and you'll see the back of me and the front of their face. Every time we had one of those, for some bizarre reason, they had the camera just kind of floating back and forth, and I found it very annoying. If you're going to do that, either sit it still, or Jonathan Frakes likes to do things where he, kind of goes around to the 2 characters while they're speaking. That's fine. But just this floating back and forth just a little bit, I found it just really irritating as all hell. We are back to swearing just because we can. It's just irritating. It doesn't belong in Star Trek. It just doesn't belong in Star Trek. It's been established for decades that swearing has gone out of style. And now, admittedly, no question. Part of the reason is that when you were, back making a show like this, you couldn't swear. It wouldn't be allowed by the network. But why is that a bad thing? It sets you up to have what sounds like a more educated cast and educated characters. And even when they could potentially swear, probably get them a high, closer to an R rating, but even when they could potentially swear in movies, they made it real clear that was just something that was uncouth. People in the 23rd century didn't do it. Star Trek 4, they talked about it, explicitly. This kind of swearing just doesn't belong in Star Trek. God, this episode, it was really a 15-minute episode. If you think about what went on in the episode, it's about 15 minutes. You could, in any other series in this franchise, this would have been a 15-minute episode. Okay, we got to go to Trill. We get there, talk to the people, beam down, get the thing done, go back up, done. and a little side stuff with the crew and all that, which I'll get to in a second. But really, if a fan editor was going to come at this, and oh God, I really suggest, if you can stand fan editors, to sit through an entire series, season of this, turn it into, a couple of 3 hours, because there ain't that much. This episode could have been done in any other series in this franchise. It would have been a 15-minute episode. There was really very, very little there. Drop Two said there was a long and insipid tirade on my Twitter the past few days. There are people who still don't realize that Starfleet is militaristic. They carry guns. Ships have weapons. There's an interesting dichotomy about that. Yes, it's certainly true that Starfleet does often act as the military wing of the Federation. But there's also the fact that Starfleet has also have a very long history of exploration. Now, I think you can marry those things together pretty easily because, all the stuff that we've seen over the last 50 plus years shows us that, exploration is dangerous, and they are obviously a paramilitary organization and organized along those lines. So, they sort of serve a dual purpose, but absolutely, there's no question, Starfleet is the Federation's military wing when necessary. Hey, Jeanette, how are you doing tonight? And they were uniforms. Big giveaway. This debate has been going on since the original series. Yeah, it's one of those deals where you have to say, all right, Starfleet's primary mission is exploration. That said, they do often act as a military arm of the Federation, and they are organized along paramilitary lines, and so you can't get away from that. It's part of the deal. But you also have to say every place we've seen them go and do over the last 50-some years is always kind of dangerous. You want to have weapons. You want to be prepared. Other thing about this, the stuff that bothered me, is this crew is a bunch of self-absorbed, cowardly, whiny bitches. I mean, seriously. Let us think back now. Where else in this franchise have we had a situation that's at least a little bit similar to this one in terms of the premise? Oh yeah, all of Star Trek Voyager. Now, admittedly, they didn't go, 1,000 years into the future. They went to a place where it was going to take them at least 70 years or so that they thought to get back, and they kept adding time by constantly stopping to do exploration. But those guys didn't have much problem with it. Theoretically, when they got back, if they had, had to take the entire 70 years, everybody they knew would be old or dead, and they wouldn't have had, the drastic changes in the Federation and all that we see. But they weren't whiners about it. You didn't see them going around moping around the halls and not getting along together. They just all accepted, well, this is part of the danger of what we do, and now we're kind of stuck in it. They didn't sit there and whine and carry on and whine. God, that's what they did, whined and carry on. This is, as always, not showing us the best of humanity, which is what Star Trek always did. This is showing us basically 20th century people, more specifically the current modern 20-ish generation, who tend to be whiny about stuff. To me, it doesn't belong in Star Trek. It stands in very stark contrast to what went on in Voyager, where we had people, two different crews that were merging together, that got along. After a few years, they were really, sort of family with each other. But they didn't start out going, oh, everything's terrible for me, everything's rotten, oh, it's all awful and rotten and mean and awful. Oh, I can't stand my life, blah, 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 blah. It just irritated the crap out of me. Let's see. Yeah, Drop 2 says, I come in peace, but I carry a big gun. It helps me create peace. Sometimes you need one. Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt once said, speak softly, but carry a big stick. Of course, Yosemite Sam once later said, well, I speak loudly, and I carry a bigger stick, and I use it, too. That's an actual quote that I remember of his. Some of the people who, the person who, man, I got to tell you, man, Stamets, the guy has resting crying face. It's if you watch Michelle Obama, no matter what she did, she had resting bitch face. She looked like she was pissed off all the time, even when she wasn't. Stamets has resting crying face. The guy looks like he's about to break out crying under almost any circumstances, and it's irritating to me. I tell you what, dude. look a little more forceful and not like you're just about to cry under almost any circumstances. It's getting really, really old. Really old. Burnham, called by many in this Star Trek review sort of community as Mikey Spock, remains a Mary Sue. Nothing can happen without her. You got to have her down on the planet. You got to have her as the central for everything. There's, as I said, the second episode where she wasn't on was such a nice breath, change of pace, because you weren't sitting there watching, okay, what we have to wait for what Mikey Spock, Mary Sue does. And this time around, she was the same thing. Had to be involved in it all the way up and down the line. Tilly has resting hungry face. Well, I don't necessarily think that's true. I say this often, but, the thing is about actors in Hollywood and when you're on film. If you look at me, I don't know how much you can tell that I'm overweight. I'm overweight by probably a good 30 pounds, maybe more. Hasn't done me any good to be stuck at home a lot of the time and not able to go to the gym. I am sort of starting to lose it off now, and that's a good thing, but I got a ways to go. But you get somebody, it's just, you get anybody who has a normal sort of weight, and they look fat. They look fat. And those uniforms are not doing them any favors. They need to have uniforms kind of like they did, said before, in the Star Trek movies, where that cast was getting older, they were getting a little heavier, especially Jimmy Doohan, and they would not look good in like original series uniforms, so you have to put kind of skinny, kind of svelte to wear those pretty well. So they gave them jackets, and they were kind of thicker, and they looked okay on people that were a little bit heavier for a long time, many years. But when you get somebody like her who has basically kind of a normal weight in real life, I'm sure if you met her in real life, she'd look more normal than anybody else. But she looks terrible on screen, and those uniforms do absolutely nothing for her. Yep, Jeanette says, speak softly, carry a big stick, and be prepared to use it. Yeah. One question I did have to ask throughout the episode is, what happened to the transporters? Did I miss something here? Why did they have to take a shuttle? I thought the whole point of the transporters was to get from point A to point B. Dramatically, that was the entire point, so that you didn't have to spend any time landing a spaceship that you couldn't have the budget to land every week. But regardless, you captain's log, something happened, let's beam down, we're there. We're in the action immediately. We don't have to wait around. This time we waited around for no good reason. Sarah said, okay, we're going to go down. And then we got conversation after conversation, and then going into the shuttle and all that. And I had to wonder, why was this shuttle painted like a World War II fighter? That's kind of weird. Not going to talk about it much other than that. There were some callbacks. Some of them worked, some didn't. This is really kind of a short review because, again, I'm giving this sucker a 2 out of 5, with 1 being existentially threateningly bad, 5 being passable, and so 2 out of 5 isn't a hell of a lot. It really is only a 15-minute episode if you get rid of all the fat and the filler and the nonsense. The crew having trouble, right? This is one of those things that, like, why did you have to have the computer to tell you to do the right thing? Computer tell them, hey, let's have movie night. Okay, movie night sounds like a good idea to me. Get everybody together for movie night. That makes sense to me. Maybe not Buster Keaton, but, maybe, who knows. But you didn't have to have the new sapient computer, it's becoming sapient, tell you that. You could have just done it. That's not really a new idea. This is something we've seen since the 2100s with Star Trek Enterprise. So that's not something you couldn't have, And the whole thing with the meeting, sort of a captain's table, meal. That's where it all just really fell apart. The first time that it looked like it was going south, I would have been sorry. I said, okay, well, nice dinner. Let's all go. Let's not get Stamets looking like he's going to cry. Let's not get, what's her face, whose name I don't remember, the cyborg, saying totally inappropriate things that nobody should ever say. All of it's totally out of character, and it really is, well, it's not out of character for this bunch, but it really does create the impression of a whiny, self-absorbed, cowardly bunch of bitches on this show. It just doesn't work for me. Drop 2 says, why are the characters so exaggerated, hysterically happy, to morbidly depressed, to exciting, running about like headless chicks wailing and crying? I still like the callousness of Giorgio. Well, she remains, because the target market for Star Trek under Alex Kurtzman is the woke. And he's done an extraordinarily good job of attracting that audience. It's obvious to me whenever you go on Twitter or Facebook, Twitter in particular, if you ever get into an argument about it with somebody, just experimentally, totally unemotionally on your part, call them a leftist and see what a torrent and barrage of nasty things that they'll start to say about you that are clearly straight out of the woke handbook. This is for the woke, and apparently for the woke, having all of this useless interpersonal drama that doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, that turns your entire crew into a bunch of, self-absorbed, cowardly, whiny bitches. That's what they look for. Don't ask me. I don't get it either. Giorgio, on the other hand, continues to be the person that I would drop off at the nearest jail. She's interesting to see, but she has been nothing but a liability this entire time. She comes from a place where you just know at some point down the road she's going to double-cross them all for her own purposes. I mean, you just know. I don't have to be told sometime during this season she's going to double-cross them all. Me, I'd have her in the brig, and the first time I got to a civilized planet like Earth last week, I'd say, hey, you got a nice jail cell where this person can be hung out to dry for the remainder of her life, and make sure you keep a close watch on her. Don't let her out of her cell. That's what I'd be doing. Drop True says, you called me a Drekkie. I'm going to ban you. Pointless threat. Yes. I mean, I don't necessarily call them Drekkies, but I do look at it and go, okay, these people are the woke. I mean, it's the exact same crowd. It is, the target audience is the woke, and they have done a good job of attracting them. Is STD Season 4 confirmed? I believe it is. I haven't looked at it that closely. I keep having to wonder, what is it about this show that's so damn good that it keeps getting season renewals before the previous one is even done airing or streaming? I don't get it. Ordinarily you'd want to. I guess I sort of do get it. They're in a position where they have CBS has completely bet the farm on Star Trek with their streaming series. The streaming series, if Star Trek is seen to be going under, so will the streaming series. CBS All Access, next to be soon Paramount Plus, will die because there's nothing else on that service that you actually care about. I know I don't care about it, and this stuff is such crap that I'm sure not paying money for it. But they seem to be, and again, I think it's given how horrid their numbers are when they broadcast this stuff on CBS. I have to assume that basically what's going on is they're kind of going, okay, well we have to keep doing this. This is our flagship show on the streaming service that we cannot allow to fail. We want to be the next Netflix or maybe Hulu, but they want to be the next one of those. And if this seems to die, then that streaming service just dies right along with it. They have nothing else on there that's worth watching. Drop 2 is saying, how many episodes will STD season have? I doubt it'll be 22 as previous seasons. Oh, God, no. No, 10 episodes. 10 episodes per season. Period. End of story. They have not yet reached the number of episodes that they had in Star Trek, the original series, both with Discovery and Picard. Haven't yet reached them. You've only got, with the, before 3 seasons, 10 episodes each, 30, 40. So you're talking 40 episodes of both of these series, and somehow Star Trek, the original series, did 79. So anyway, it's going to be 10 episodes season. That's the way it always is. 10 episodes is half a season for normal TV. I think they may be taking their cues somewhat from like Doctor Who. Doctor Who had been, since it came back in 2005, has been 12 episodes, with the exception of the current Doctor, where they've knocked it down to only 10. I think 10 is too little. 12 is just barely enough to get, if you're a good writer, to get good drama going. Here, we're on episode 4. Episode 5 next week is going to be halfway through the season. So clearly they're going to save anything really having to do with wherever the Federation is and all that for the very last moment, as they often do with this. And in between time, we're going to get whining and complaining and cowardly acts and things that don't make sense, and shows that could be 15 minutes long if you just cut out all the fat. So, let's see. Archer season 11 was only 8 episodes. How annoying! Yeah, I haven't watched that show, so I don't know anything about it. I can't talk intelligently about that at all. But I do think, you look for me. I look at it and I go, well, geez, 10 episodes. I mean, come on, man. 10 episodes of content that could be 15 minutes long. That's where kind of I'm at with it. Anyway, enough of that crap. And it was enough of that crap. Let me talk about what I was the main topic for tonight, which was, is it time to break up the United States? Drop 2 says, many of the HBO series have only 10 episodes. Yeah, it's becoming more common, but, look over at the Orville. That's about to start on Hulu. By the way, Seth MacFarlane, you've got me very, very, very close to canceling my Hulu subscription. I have only one subscription to one streaming service. Everything else I find other ways. If I want to watch anything, it's not a problem. But I have a subscription there because I want to support the Orville. Seth MacFarlane's recent tweets, where he's starting to get into politics, have got me this close to just canceling it and saying, screw it, I'm going to get this content the same way I do everything else. There was a time that was not that long ago when entertainers knew that if they started screwing around in politics, that it was going to alienate at least half of their audience. I will never forget, in the 1990s, I was at a Star Trek convention in Chicagoland, and there was, one of the guests was Cole Meany, and he got asked things about whether there should be a reunification between Ireland and Northern Ireland, and he was very roundabout and circumspect about it. He didn't really give out an opinion per se. He just said, well, I hope that, I think so, but I hope it all works out very peacefully, because at that time you had a lot of terrorist bombings by the IRA and things like that. So he was relatively nondescript on it. He knew that talking about it in any great detail was going to piss off half of his potential fans and his audience, so why do it, That was pretty much the case with all entertainers. They didn't get much into politics. Occasionally had some ones that did, but not very much, because they knew it was just going to anger half of their audience. Why do that? Why anger half of your audience by giving out an ill-informed opinion that is just guaranteed to anger somebody? Seth MacFarlane has started pissing me off. Marina Sirtis of Star Trek The Next Generation totally pissed me off. There's several others where it's just like, okay, I don't want to hear anything that you ever have to say. And if I ever have occasion to go to a convention, you're going to be the last person that I look up for any kind of autograph or picture with. Forget that. Drop 2 says, a song that describes U.S. today, in my opinion, would be The Doors' The End. Get on the blue bus. Driver, where are you taking us? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I in fact, I'll transition into this shortly. I did want to make one other minor anecdotal thing. Same convention that I was at, and those of you who are Star Trek fans will know about this. It was between Season 3 and Season 4. Season 3 had a really big cliffhanger on what is arguably Star Trek The Next Generation's best episode, The Best of Both Worlds, Part 1 and 2. Part 1 came at the end of the season, and then we had to wait months to find out what was going to happen in Part 2. And Cole Meany was there. It was in between all of that. It was when they'd started shooting already. So fans were asking things like, because Picard had been turned into a Borg, and we were all like, so is he going to come back? What's going to happen with that? He was all, kind of pushing it away. No spoilers. Didn't talk about it in those terms, but he was all deflecting it and all. I raised my hand because I heard everybody else, and I could think of something to say. I said, so tell me, has Patrick Stewart signed a new contract for this season? And he just looks at me and goes, what do I look like, his agent? That's my one of my minor brushes with greatness, if you can call talking to Cole Meany greatness. Drop 2 says, it's rampant narcissism and hubris that convinces celebrities that they actually have something worthwhile to say, and they don't. Yes, they're just a bunch of radical socialists for the overwhelming most part. One of the few people on the Star Trek side of things that I pay any attention to, Kirstie Alley, who played Lieutenant Saavik in Star Trek II, arguably the best Star Trek movie ever made. She's much more of a conservative, takes a lot of heat for it. Marina Sirtis once said when she discovered that Kirstie Alley was backing Trump, she sent her a tweet and said, "You're dead to me now." And I'm like, what, the two of you hung out before? Kirstie Alley is now retired and lives in Kansas someplace. And you're basically unworking and over in Hollywood. You never worked on the same projects ever. Did you really think you were tight in some way? Because it didn't seem like that to me. Anyway, transitioning into breaking up the United States. Well, it's been my fear for a long time that we're headed for a civil war. Shooting civil war, I think we've seen the beginning of it already. One thing you can say about all of the rampant voter fraud that has clearly been going on this time around, and that Project Veritas can prove in spades if you don't, and if you can see it other places. I wish somebody would come up, because I haven't been able to keep track of it all. I wish somebody would come up with a compilation video of things that are posted on Twitter, of videos where you can see them doing things they shouldn't be doing, with ballots and stuff. Clearly a lot of voter fraud going on at this point. And if you want to see some of it in action, look at James O'Keefe at Project Veritas. His channel is linked to in my description below. I think the best thing you can say about our, insanity with voting here is that it may have postponed a shooting civil war. When Tuesday night came and went, I was here for 6 hours. There was no decision by the end of that, and it was clear there wasn't going to be any decision for a while. And there still isn't a decision, and it's getting crazier and crazier and crazier. And the net result was that the people who wanted to go out and riot didn't really know what to do. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It certainly could come back to bite us, but it may have been good in terms of shooting at people. That some of that might have been staved off at least. You're saying Kirstie Alley is a Scientologist wacko. Yes, she is. Yeah, no question about that. I certainly wouldn't agree with her religious faith particularly. And I think from everything I've read, Scientology is more of a cult designed to take apart you from your money than anything else. But it's her money. If she wants to go and do it, let her do it. I always say I'm an atheist. I don't care what your faith is, as long as you're not hurting anybody else in the process. The Scientology as a faith, in terms of how they intimidate their members to not quit or intimidate the ones who have left, that is bad. That's bad. But if you're just somebody like her who's into it and you're not doing anything personally, well, okay, whatever. I don't think it's Scientology is weird. Very, very weird on many levels. But we do have this problem with our rampant voting fraud, and I am unclear how you clean it up now. I don't know that there isn't anything for it but a new election. I don't know how you clean it up right now. There's just no way to tell how much voter fraud has been going on and where. It appears to be very, very common. And this may have been the intent by the Democrats in order to throw this whole thing into some level of chaos and have the insanity hopefully work to their favor as time goes on. I don't know that it will, but when you have elections that are no longer working, in the country that is supposed to be the example of free and fair elections, in the country that is supposed to be the number one, the gold standard, the leader of the free world, and you can't get an election right, you have a problem. You have a serious problem. Drop Truth is saying, I won't bore you with all my stories of personal experience with Scientology. Yes, it's a cult in every sense of the word. That's certainly been what I've thought about when I've heard about it. I was very interested years ago when South Park sort of spilled the beans on what some of their upper echelon people are taught in terms of Lord Xenu and all of this weird stuff that was clearly just science fiction that came out of L. Ron Hubbard's head. Not surprisingly, he was a science fiction author, although nobody I ever read. But in any case, we have rampant voter fraud. It is so obvious and so clear. If you don't think there's been rampant voter fraud, then you just haven't been paying attention. That's a problem. That is a big problem. And our voting system no longer works. And I don't know how you fix it. You could, because they're never going to require any kind of IDs. They're never going to clean up the voter rolls in various states that have, people who don't live there anymore, or people that are dead, or stuff like that. They're never going to clean those up. The Postal Service appears to be somewhat complicit. And what are you going to do? Clear out the Postal Service completely of all of its management? That's not going to happen. You have to have acts of Congress and stuff like that and laws passed. And the people who pass those, well, at best it'll be deadlocked, like Marshall says, with a Republican Senate and a Democratic House. Not much is going to get done with it, so it's not going to get changed. What do you do? What do you do with it? What is your solution? Well, mine is... we have other problems. Before I get into what I have some specific things about, we have other problems. We have problems with power-mad sociopathic narcissism. Because all of our various, politicians at almost every level are some level of power-mad sociopathic narcissist. Now, I always point my viewers, I always source it. There's a link to antisocial personality disorder, which is what sociopathy is. And there's a link in there, too, in my description box to narcissistic personality disorder. And I usually say, go do the readings. But this time around, I'm going to just read some stuff to you about what you can look with in terms of symptoms. So someone who is antisocial personality disorder, and pardon me if I'm going to look off to the right, I'm going to have to do that, is defined by a pervasive and persistent disregard for morals, social norms, and the rights and feelings of others. Individuals with this personality disorder will typically have no compunction in exploiting others in harmful ways for their own gain or pleasure, and frequently manipulate and deceive other people, achieving this through wit and a facade of superficial charm or through intimidation and violence. They may display arrogance, think lowly and negatively of others, and lack remorse in their harmful actions, and have a callous attitude to those who they have harmed. Irresponsibility is a core characteristic of this disorder. They can have significant difficulties in maintaining stable employment, as well as fulfilling their social and financial obligations, and people with this disorder often lead exploitative, unlawful, or parasitical lives. Given what that says, I think what you can say about most politicians is that they are actually what you call high-functioning power-mad sociopathic narcissist. All high-functioning means in a psychological term is that they can get along in society. Well, when you look at that list of things, does that not remind you a lot of our politicians? There's a lot of stuff in there that you can say, yeah, they kind of disregard what they do with people. They don't care how other people think and feel as long as they get what they want, which is more power. Drop of Truth is saying L. Ron Hubbard was an occultist with Jack Parsons, a follower of Aleister Crowley, a common and worst sci-fi author ever. His peers declared Battlefield Earth to be satire. It was so awful. I haven't read anything that he ever wrote. I have attempted to sit through the movie Battlefield Earth, but really I prefer watching people's reviews of it on YouTube. There's a guy who does Advanced Sci-Fi Civilizations Too Stupid to Exist, and the ones from that are right at the top for him, and I think he's right. But in terms of narcissistic personality disorder, let me read you some of that as well. Some of the symptoms are, for example, this is defined in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, which is what psychologists and psychiatrists use to help them, diagnose personality disorders. They look for various symptoms. Some of them have a grandiose sense of self-importance, e.g. exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. Yeah. They're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Believes that they are special and unique and can only be understood by or should be associated with other special or high-status people or institutions. They require excessive admiration, have a sense of entitlement, i.e. unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with their expectations, is interpersonally exploitative, i.e. take advantage of others to achieve their own ends, lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others, is often envious of others and believes that others are envious of them, and shows arrogant, haughty behaviors and attitudes. If you look at all of our politicians, you're going to find some combination of those two disorders. I don't know that as a layman, I can't go out and say, hey, this person is particularly antisocial, that one's particularly narcissistic. But if you just look at those, those traits, you can see that really look like to me they're high functioning, power-mad sociopathic narcissists. Some of those various symptoms apply at various levels to all of them. I think you could look at like Hillary Clinton and say, okay, there's somebody who is sociopathic more than anything else, high-functioning sociopathic. And I think you can look at Donald Trump and say, well, there's somebody who's a lot more high-functioning narcissistic. Drop 2 says, the problem I see with the woke is that they don't understand that you have to earn respect. It is not freely given. That is true of success, too. That's certainly true. That's certainly true of the woke. That's part of it. The woke are also kind of narcissistic. If you think about it in the terms that, I gave you in terms of possible, symptoms to look for, kind of narcissistic, kind of sociopathic. And, of course, we have Lord Acton's admonition from several hundred years ago. He was a British, he was a member of the British aristocracy, when he said, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's true of any government. Any government. Anytime you give somebody much power, it will corrupt them. And if you look at what the type of power that Lord Acton was talking about in his era, as opposed to the kind of power that our elected representatives and stuff have right now, they have now far more power than they ever did when Lord Acton was talking about it. They have much closer to absolute power than anything Lord Acton talked about. So that is a huge problem for us. Power-mad, sociopathic narcissism in just about all of our elected representatives. I see it in my governor now that he's got the chance to clamp masks on us for no good reason. I see it in our mayor, same thing. They're king of their own little fiefdom now. They've got power, and they love it. And they don't care if people get hurt in the process in terms of what they do. They know better than you, and so it's important for that. Agreeing with me, I understand that. You're just adding to my analysis, not disagreeing. I understand that. Then you get into things like the virus that I can't talk about by name for fear of my channel getting ranked even lower. And that is infection vectors. I have said this a million times on this show. The infection vectors for something like this virus matter. You get to New York City, incredibly dense population. So right there, big vector for infection. If you're standing shoulder to shoulder with 10 other people, one of them has it, it's likely to spill over. They have multiple international airports where no one is screened coming in for anything, and goods and services coming in are not screened for anything. They have many, many international seaports. No one coming in is screened for anything. No good or service coming in is screened for anything. There's big infection vectors. They have a lot of tourism, except this summer, but usually they have a lot of tourism. I have some very fond memories of New York City myself. I'll never go there again because I don't want to sully those memories with what it's become. But they have lots of tourism, generally speaking. So they just have a huge infection vector. There's no way around it. They're going to have problems. It doesn't matter whether it's this virus or another one or something worse. They will be the hardest hit, period. Anywhere will be the New York City will be the hardest hit. Get out to my neck of the woods. Well, Nebraska's landlocked. We have no international airports, no international trade, aside from what may go from here to like O'Hare and in Chicago or something like that. We have no tourism. Nobody stops in Nebraska for 2 weeks. They stop here at best for a night to stay on their way somewhere. They don't stop to see the sights outside of our couple of 3 metro areas. They don't go and see the endless amounts of grass and cows. That's not what you come to Nebraska for. You're on your way somewhere. We have very low population density. Even Omaha, a city of 1 million, does not have anything like the population density that they have in New York City. And our cities tend to grow outwards because we're not constricted by geography. When you're out, even in Chicago, you're constricted. You can't go any farther to the east because you got a big lake right there. Going to the west, north, and south to some extent are still constrained a little bit by some of the geography and also state lines. New York City is very, very constricted. These cities tend to grow up, where we tend to just grow out, so the population density doesn't come into play. Let's see. Drop it to says the kindergarten game. I'm the king of the castle. You're the dirty rascal. Did you play that in the USA? No, I don't recall that game particularly. When we were growing up, we were generally of the opinion that our elected officials were generally pretty good people. We were wrong. We've always been wrong, but if the sanitation services ever go on strike, severely damage New York City, then they'll drown in their own sewage in a week. There's no question about that. They have a number of things that, if they had problems with the sewage, garbage disposal, etc. And you do see some of that from time to time that happens, and in particular neighborhoods too. So we have these differing infection vectors, and it was not necessary to destroy the economy of my state because it was bad in New York City. It was totally unnecessary. You didn't need to do what was done. You did not need to shut down all of these businesses, destroy lives and fortunes, have businesses that will never open again. It was not necessary to do that. It may have been necessary to do that in New York City, again, because of massive population density, all the vectors that they've got, but it was not necessary to do that here. It wasn't necessary to do it in a lot of Midwestern states and upper Great Plains states. It wasn't necessary. We didn't have the problem. We weren't going to have the problem. And every time I do these statistics, we're not even up to 50 people dead out of roughly 320,000 people. And that's in the county. The city itself is closer to 340,000. It was just never going to be a problem. Infection vectors matter. Hey, Jeff, nice to see you here tonight. Let me get into an issue where we now have in this country dramatically incompatible belief systems. This is largely seen, it's typified by what people want to think of as conservative versus liberal. I think of it more in terms of individualism versus groupism, the group identity politics. People always like to say things like the black community. Okay, there is no black community in the United States. There are individual black people who live in individual places around the country, whose lives are not determined by other black people who are living elsewhere in the country, but by their local conditions. So there's no black African American community. I'm not even sure that you can say that there is like a gay community. Here in Lincoln, it's a college town. We have, last I knew, and it's been a long time since I bothered to check, at least 2 gay bars. So you'll have places where individual gay people will gather, but you can't call them part of a larger gay community throughout, the entire U.S. That's nonsensical. They are living in their own areas that are governed by what conditions are where they are. They're individuals living their own lives. You can say that about anything, There is no one overarching community for all of the United States. That doesn't happen. So when you are doing things like you're saying, okay, well, the individual doesn't matter so much. What matters is the group that they belong to, and is that group oppressed? And you can't say that they're oppressed everywhere in the U.S. There are some places I'm sure that they are and some that they aren't. But they're not a single group that you can classify together. They are individuals. And in my world as a libertarian, individualism is the big thing. We think you should be able to make your own decisions for your life because it is your life and you know the best way to make those decisions. People who are, statists, groupists, people, who want to group people together, they're the power-mad sociopathic narcissists who are saying, I know better how to run your life than you do. In fact, if I ran everything, it would all be perfect, and that's just nonsense. We have totally incompatible belief systems now popping up in the U.S. that cannot be reconciled with each other. Dropper 2 says, psychological compartmentalization is how they take control. Jesuit axiom, divide and conquer. Yeah, some of that going on, but ultimately, when you get down to people like the woke, they're just, you either are in my group or you're not in my group, and if you're not in my group, you are my enemy. And that's because they have to rely on this group identity. They can't think of themselves as an individual. They have to think of themselves as part of a group, like there's some kind of hive mind, like ants or bees or the Borg or something like that without the queen. It is an incompatible belief system. And, most of the people on the groupism side don't even believe that individuals exist. And on my side, I'm like, well, I can see where you can get into groups, but you're still a group made up of individuals with your own individual life and your own individual way of solving your own individual problems. And you don't need someone else to tell you how to do it. I defy anyone in the federal government to tell me how to live my life. I'll just say, okay, here I am in Lincoln, Nebraska. Tell me what I need to do all the time for my own benefit. Well, they don't know what conditions I live under. They don't know what my job is. They don't know what my medical condition may be, for example. They don't know any of this stuff. So how could they possibly make any decisions about my life not knowing a damn thing about me? And you can't inform them, oh, God, I'm going to get to that in a second. But you can't inform them about it. They're totally uninformed and totally focused on, obtaining and keeping as much personal power for as long as they possibly can. And they only care about me when it comes time to vote for them. And even then, they don't care about me explicitly. They don't even know I exist. They don't even know you exist. You are a nameless, faceless thing out there, good for votes, and how they can sway your vote toward them, and that's all. They don't know anything about you. They can't run your life better than you can. But there is a belief system out there becoming major, particularly among large cities, that says, no, we know better how to live your life than you do. And that's nonsense. You don't know how to better live my life than you don't even know what my life is. How could you possibly tell me how I can better live my life? That's ridiculous. Yeah, do you think that part of the divide is city lifestyle versus rural lifestyle? In part. And I'm going to get to that in a minute when I talk about breaking the U.S. up. Schoolyard politics, absolutely it is to some extent, but it's enshrined in law now to some extent as well. And you certainly see it in the way that people react and behave and assume that they know how better to live your life than you do. Definitely that way in Australia, yeah. Kind of sucks everywhere. We also have definitely incompatible economic goals. There is socialism and there is individualism. Socialism veering into communism. There are two totally incompatible economic goals. You cannot have one and the other. It is impossible. You can either be an individual or you can be socialist. And that's all there is to it. There is no in between. You can't straddle that line. If you're going to have some kind of socialist bent, sorry, you're off in there. You can't do it. It is totally incompatible. You can't have, centralized planning like the Soviets tried to do with their endless 5-year programs that would never end the way that they said they were going to. We see it here too a lot. When they talk about, we'll have the budget balanced in 10 years. The number of times that I've heard that phrase throughout my life, Oh, it'll be balanced in 10 years. You won't even be in office. They'll change the laws, which is what they always do. It never stays the same. Central planning like that's just not possible. The socialist methodology of centralized planning for your life and how you get your money and how you live is incompatible with an individualistic type of world. You can't, it's not compatible. Grub 2 says, city folk think that all country folk are dumb yokels. Sure, dumb yokels that feed you and support the economy you're dependent on. Gonna get into that in just a second, as a matter of fact, when it comes down to breaking out the U.S. I said on Tuesday, when I spent 6 hours in this freaking chair, I said that I am unclear. You can see it when you look at county level and precinct level voting. I'm unclear that individual liberty can survive urbanization. I think when you get, my best example on this is, if you're out, and I'm not, but I spent summers out there when I was young. If you're out at what my grandparents' ranch was, way the hell out in the middle of nowhere. It's the cabin that's still out there that this is the interior of. This is 2 miles from the nearest gravel road. It's just ruts from here to the gravel road. And it's up a big hill that is not something that you can scale a lot of the year, because if it's too much snow, you're done. Too much precipitation, and even my Jeep would have a hard time getting through there. And then it's another 45 miles to the nearest paved road. It's another 10 miles to the small town of Wall, which is a nothing sleepy little town of about a couple of thousand people, maybe less, except during tourist season. And you have to be completely 100% self-sufficient. You have to be prepared to, as my grandfather did, deliver one of my uncles, because he didn't wait to go to the hospital. The hospital was too far away, he just didn't make it. You have to be prepared to do veterinary work. You have to be prepared to euthanize things. You have to be prepared to occasionally hunt, to get like deer, to sustain yourself sometimes. You have to be prepared to do any and all kinds of agricultural work with heavy equipment. You have to do every last one of it. When you get into a city like where I am now, well, you end up being involved in a very complex web of interconnected dependencies. I know a lot about IT. You want to know about IT? I'm your guy. You want me to fix something in your car? Well, I can probably change the oil. I can check and see if the spark plugs are attached. I can do some very, very minor things, but you get much beyond that. Hell, my Jeep right now, right? Coming home, the last time that I went out to the cabin, there's a hinge, a thing that keeps the hood down. It's not like a regular hood with it comes down with the latches or anything. You pull it down and there's a pair of little hinges that hooks on. One of the hinges came off. Well, I figured, hey, no big deal. It's just a piece of rubber or two. I can replace that. Ordered the parts, and lo and behold, I can't get to where you need to get to unscrew on the interior of that without practically taking out the freaking engine. So, just to get that done, I'm going to have to take that to, my local mechanic, and they're going to have to pull that for me because I don't have the wherewithal to do it. Happened out there. Well, you either do what I've done now, which is I've got the thing tied down and waiting to get to, to see a mechanic, or you pull that engine and fix it yourself. And that happens. So I'm not sure that individuality can actually survive urbanization. I think that you get into a problem there. You get a lot more socialism because everybody says, wait a minute, I'm dependent on this, I'm dependent on that. And since I'm so dependent on this, then this thing must become public. It must be something that doesn't cost me very much. And so you get laws that are made that say this thing has to not cost very much. Lots of stuff like that happen. I had occasion to talk to a good friend of mine, very old friend of mine, kind of a socialist, and we got into a conversation about what should or shouldn't be, considered human rights, like if health care. I don't think that's a human right. I think that's something that the price of which has been screwed up by government for the last 100 years. But whether that should be socialized, and then I asked him, I said, well, this day and age, everyone relies on the internet. Really, we do. Every single day we rely on the internet. Businesses could not function without the internet. Should what I do be socialized? Should I be made, somebody who you say, okay, well, we're going to take IT and we're going to say, okay, you guys are only going to be allowed to make a certain amount of money. You're only going to be allowed to make a certain kind of profit because you're too important. You are now a human right. And he didn't really have a good answer for that. He had to think about it. He said, I'm not sure. And that's where you get into socialism in large areas like that. Ow. Excuse me. Excuse me, I have a tooth that's a little bit tender right now, and I just poured cold water on it. Dropper 2 says it's a very good point. We have the same in Australia. How is it that a government can protect ideals and spending beyond their term of office? It's farcical. Yeah, I mean, talking about those long-term plans, it's stupid. Are they, quote, in cahoots? They're the two sides of the same coin, yet the puppets may change, but the puppeteers remain the same. I think what really remains the same is the power-mad sociopathic narcissism. And the way that, on the federal level particularly, that they do this is by controlling your purse strings. You know, you'll never see. They have been talking all of my life about reforming the U.S. tax code to be something simpler. Never happens. Never will happen, because that's the control that they want. It doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. You're a power-mad sociopathic narcissist, and the best way to control someone is the purse strings. How much money are you sending to us? Now, they may vary the amount that you have to send them, some, but you'll never drop to a point where your average person could go, oh my God, thank God, I'm only paying 3% of my income in income taxes. Oh, thank God, I've got all this money now that I can use. That'll never happen. And the tax system, well, if they wanted to change it, they could have. They haven't, and they won't. It never will happen. So we have incompatible economic goals. That's just all there is to it in this country. As I mentioned, we do have our systemic voter fraud. We do not know who the president is. I don't know if you can say for certain that we know who actually won in the House or the Senate. I don't know for sure that we'll ever know for certain, because we now have so much systemic voter fraud. It is now systemic. We want to talk about systemic racism. Well, I'll tell you what. Listen to some some first responder frequencies for a while, and you tell me that they're being systemically racist, because you won't hear it. But systemic voter fraud, go watch James O'Keefe. Just watch his videos and look at some of the stuff people have just anecdotally taken videos of polling places. Man, the one that really sounds astonishing to me is, I believe it was Arizona, where Republican voters were given Sharpies to fill in their ballots with on Scantron machines, meaning they won't scan. We can look at various places around the country where more people have voted than there were registered voters. You get 125% turnout. Okay, that's got to be voter fraud. It seems to be totally systemic. I don't know what you do about it anymore. Best thing I can think about it to do right now would be totally reform it, but that'll never happen. And have a brand new election, that'll never happen. We are stuck with this. It's not going to go away. Oh, Sharpies do scan on the Scantron forms they're using? I didn't know that. I just heard this in the background because there's so much going on right now, and it's part of the reason I don't have a lot of prepared remarks on this is because it's changing every hour. You can't tell for sure. You hear stories like that, and then you go, okay, me personally, I use Scantron machines when I was teaching, but those Scantron machines required a number 2 pencil. Pen wasn't going to cut it. Sharpie wasn't going to cut it. You had to have a number 2 pencil on those types of Scantron machines. But that was, 10, 12 years ago now. And I don't know that they've changed those necessarily. School Scantron machines have stayed the same since I was in school. Marshall said it's actually preferred on them. Oh, okay, according to the manufacturer. I didn't know that. Like I say, all I'm hearing is constant chaos. And it's about impossible for me to make any real sense out of it other than to say, I have never seen this before, at least not so upfront. I have never seen this so upfront before. And James O'Keefe's videos on Project Veritas are just absolutely damning, including, the potentially systemic stuff going on in the United States Postal Service. It's insane. It is totally insane. And we are no longer something that you can look at and say, I don't think you can say that we have free and fair elections anymore. I think this one proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that we don't. We're bordering on banana republic time with this sort of thing. I mean, oh, we don't have, like in the Soviets, 100% of the people would, vote for Stalin or else. We don't have that going on. But we clearly have a lot of voter fraud going on, and I think it looks very systemic to me. It doesn't look like there's any place that's particularly free of it. I think if I looked very hard here in Lincoln, Nebraska, I'd probably find some. I don't know for sure, but I think I probably would. You just can't tell anymore. That is the worst part about it. As a citizen, you can't tell anymore. Then we have problems with our media propaganda complex. Always scrolls past my lower third. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. That's as true right now as it was 5 minutes ago, as it was 5 years ago, as it was 50 years ago. Always like to point people to the movie The Front Page from 1931, the 1931 version specifically. Happened to be in a play. This was a play, a stage play in 1929 that got made into a movie. Happened to be in a mounting of that stage play one time, which is why it really sticks in my memory. But for 40 years, if people who haven't been watching me don't know, for 40 years I've engaged in a very masochistic hobby of debunking the press. It's so ingrained in my own thinking now that I do it just automatically. Anytime I'm dealing with any press report, I say, okay, what's wrong with this? What looks wrong with that? And can I trace back and see where the story originated and how true does what I'm reading seem to be compared to where the story originated and things like that. Well, the media propaganda complex is now quite clearly, obviously, in bed with Democrats. Done and done. There is no question about it whatsoever. Not only have they not been particularly reliable ever, and again, that movie, The Front Page, linked to below in my description box. The Front Page is a dark satire, but all of the behavior, the stories that you see filed by the reporters in this thing, and why and how they report them, and the sensationalism involved, and the lies. This is how the press has always been. The Hearst newspaper syndicate got the U.S. into the Spanish-American War. They have never, ever been trustworthy. Even when Walter Cronkite, who was the anchor at CBS, at one time considered the most trusted man in America. No, he wasn't actually trustworthy. He just seemed it. He was very good at it, but he wasn't actually that trustworthy. They've never been good at reporting the facts, and they are now clearly in bed with the Democrats, period. They will not report stuff, the number of things, that laptop belonging to that individual who is associated with that other individual who might or might not have been running for president this time around. Just totally, completely overlooked, ignored. Stories were spiked, just totally censored out. If you wanted to find out about that, you had to do it all entirely on your own. Not even the supposedly conservative outlets were particularly covering that. And that would have been, if it had been covered in a way that, say, if that laptop had belonged to someone that was associated with the current president, that would have been like front page news, and it would have been certainly enough, given what it was, to cause lots and lots of people to go, well, okay, I don't like this other guy, but this one is clearly corrupt and has clearly been corrupt for quite a long time. It just took it away, didn't want to report it, took it away. And all of this stuff going on with systemic voter fraud, they're not going to report on that. That's left to James O'Keefe. It's almost entirely his domain. I don't know what you can, in terms of the press reporting that I'm seeing on it. I'm unclear what you can believe and what you can't, because I'm not in a position to be able to sit down there and do the facts and run the legwork for myself. I'd love to be able to do what O'Keefe does and say, get into my local post office and see if they're doing the same stuff that he's showing. I would love to be able to get on the inside of who's doing the vote counting and see if they're throwing away ballots. I don't know that they're not doing that. Seems like they're doing it elsewhere, but the press won't talk about it. They won't talk about it at all. They're 100% behind the Democrat, whoever the hell that may be. They're going to be 100% behind it, and they will lie about the other one. Been lying about Trump forever, to the point where, Joseph Goebbels said it's the big lie. He said a big lie often enough, people will believe it. You can find endless amounts of footage of Donald Trump, for example, disavowing anything related to racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., down the line. But the press will not report that. They will not report it. They'll keep acting as though he's never said it. He rejects it out of hand. They'll never report that. They just pull out one single quote completely out of context from something that happened years ago, and that's what they run with constantly. They are 100% behind the Democrats, and that is that. And you will never change that, because they themselves tend to be very, very socialist. They don't see themselves as socialist, but that's because they live in a bubble. If I've noticed over the years, having been involved in several different professions in my lifetime, right? I mean, I know a little bit. I know just enough to be kind of conversant. I'm not an expert, but I am kind of conversant in how cattle ranching operates, for example. I had been at one point an actor, and then later, much more lucratively, in computer science and IT. And they attract very different personality types. People who are in ranching tend to be kind of loners, but still very, very self-reliant, very self-driven. They know that if they don't do something, it don't get done. You get into IT, well, we tend to be a bit more on the private side, a little more, introverted. Very few of us make very good management because we tend to lack the interpersonal skills to do that. If you're somebody in IT who winds up in management, you're kind of unusual. We tend to prefer the newest, fastest, sexiest hardware over necessarily human beings. So there's that. And then you get into the arts that I was into, and you can count the press as part of the arts at this point. And they attract almost nothing but communists and socialists at every level. When I was doing it, even the level that I was doing it, which never got higher than summer stock theaters in the upper Great Plains, we were nothing but socialists and communists. I was an outright communist at one time. Grew out of it, thank God. But I was an outright communist, and I wasn't anything unusual. Part of the reason I won't go back ever, and the reason I'm doing my own thing, is because if I had to go back to that, I would not be able to stand being around those people. They'd be bitching on about Trump or bitching on about this socialist cause or that socialist cause. I would not be able to stand them. I would not be able to stand them. I will come back for theater for one role only. If you offer me the role of the criminologist in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I will come back and keep my head down. But that's just because I want that one role. That's not Rocky Horror Picture Show. Rocky Horror Picture Show was originally a stage play, the Rocky Horror Show. You can see a couple of it, of good versions of it on YouTube if you look. But if you wanted to hire me as the criminologist, I would do that. Nothing else, because I could not stand to be around those people for very long. So there's the media propaganda complex that makes life miserable. There is the big tech propaganda complex, and they are absolutely part of the problem. They are in it for the Democrats and socialists and communists worldwide. The fact that I have 300 some subscribers, and yet my videos typically on YouTube don't go very far above, they almost never go above double digits. My views for my live streams, well, I'm not sure how many I've got right now. Looks like I may have had as many as 25 or so people come and go. But my subscribers are not notified about my videos. Why? Because of the content. Because it goes against what the big tech propaganda complex is behind. And you can see it, on Twitter, on social media, Facebook, everywhere. Facebook recently went into a round of shutting down conservative pages that people had put up. I have a page for Tales from SYL Ranch there. Apparently I'm so small that I don't hit their radar, but larger ones have been shut down for no good reason. We have seen it happen on Twitter, where people's accounts will be shut down, or, hell, they even, for a while, they were shutting out the president. I mean, come on, man. No. And they are clearly into it. For Democrats, for socialists, for communists, despite the fact that I think a lot of the people that work there the people that I worked with tended to be in, places like Chicago or Des Moines or smaller cities and stuff like that. The guys I worked with tended to be relatively conservative. But I think when you get out into the West Coast, Silicon Valley, where all of these places are actually, controlled from, I had to work with them on occasion. Hated every last minute of it because they looked down on me. They were very socialist. When I was out there in the late 1990s, I guess, when I was working on something, and I was out there with a bunch of them, and they had just glowingly told me how whatever suburb we were in had just passed a law that made it illegal to smoke in your own home. What? My immediate reaction was, wow, that's crazy. And like, no, that's a good thing, blah, 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 blah. And sure enough, California does it. It starts to filter down, I'm not a smoker anymore. Don't think it's good for you. Don't think you should do it. But by the same token, I'm not, I grew up with parents that smoked. I don't think it has significantly altered my health in any particular way. I think if you're going to do it in your own home, who cares? Who cares? So there's the big tech propaganda complex that is totally against individual liberty and totally in it for socialist communists, and in particular in the United States, the Democratic Party. And they flex this muscle all the time. And both they and the press, the media industrial complex, are actively trying to influence people to vote and think one way or the other. And it's all to the left. There is no comparable thing for the right. There just isn't. Doesn't exist. There are some alternative social media, and some of them are growing, but nothing that's got the reach of Twitter, of Facebook, YouTube, places like that. So, it's not just me either on Facebook, on Twitter, or YouTube rather, where, my videos don't get shown to my subscribers. You can ask any number of them. You can ask somebody like Daisy Cousins, who's from Australia. And she will talk about routinely the moment that she uploads a video, it gets demonetized like that. Now, the problem with that is when you're operating at her level and you have that many subscribers, and lots of them will get notified, and then, it gets shared on social media just by virtue of it being big enough. The most lucrative period when you put up a video is from right when you put it up, because then you get this influx of views. And then if it's demonetized, you lose that money until it's undemonetized. One time she did a test where she just uploaded nothing but silence, 5 seconds of silence of herself. And that was automatically demonetized. Clearly, it's not even looking at content when you operate at her level. It's saying, oh, Daisy Cousins sent something up, demonetize automatically, make her fight to get it monetized again. Clearly, there is an anti-individualist mindset at work at the big tech industrial complex. The big tech propaganda complex. So what do you do about it? Well, I thought long and hard, and it seems to me like you're either headed for a flat-out shooting civil war, or maybe there's another possibility, and that would be breaking up the United States. I always like to show this video, this picture. I show it from time to time. And the reason for that is this is a good map of what subcultures actually exist in the U.S. People want to say, oh, there's a black subculture. No, there's not a black subculture. There are black people black individuals who live certain places, but they do not make up as a whole throughout the country a subculture. It's just the way it is. Drop two things, you'll have to catch me on demand. Company has arrived. Well, good luck. Thank you very much. Great seeing you in, as always. Drop a tooth, by the way. Thank you very much for that thing that happened on social media today. I may talk about it later. I think probably helped calm that down, so thank you. I hadn't gotten back to you yet, but thanks. I always like to put up this picture, because this picture is a picture of professional wrestling territories in Canada and the U.S., back in the territory era. That was before WWE came along and basically took everything over. This, to me, is a representative of actual subcultures in the United States that generally break down on geographic and economic lines. The reason that I think this is because each of these various territories that you see in different colors had a different way of packaging and running their product so that it would sell to the cultures in which they were servicing. So, for example, this is Nebraska here. Let's see if I can get my finger on right. That's Nebraska. That's roughly my exact location is right where my finger is. That's Nebraska. We were part of the American Wrestling Association, and the AWA was run out of Minneapolis by a guy named Vern Gagne, and his background was such that he liked to push professional wrestling as a real sport by virtue of saying, okay, well, this guy who's wrestling right now has this amateur background, or maybe he had a title in some other territory, which they didn't talk about very much in other territories. But he would push the product by saying this is real. This is somebody who's got a real background. And then they'd get, the heels. There were always baby faces, the good guys. Heels that were the bad guys. Baby faces usually did what was, good, clean wrestling. Technical wrestling is what he liked to call it. And the bad guys would break the rules and stuff like that. He had a co-promoter for a while, Wally Carbo, who was utterly famous for when somebody would do something bad, Carbo would come out and say, there's going to be fines, there's going to be suspensions. He'd just say that all the time. There were no fines or suspensions. But he didn't, this is back when they pretended that the match outcomes weren't predetermined. So in the 1950s, what happened was all of these territory guys got together and they formed the National Wrestling Alliance. And they said, we're going to carve up the entire country. We're going to give you each a piece, and you can decide how you're going to market to your various piece. And that's how Vern Gagne did things up in the AWA. But I've watched a lot of wrestling since then, because back then you didn't see other territories wrestling. It was before cable TV. You saw your local TV show running it. And all you would ever see in the AWA was whoever was wrestling in the AWA at that time. You didn't even see the people down from Kansas City. And you certainly didn't see them over in Memphis-ish over there. I've watched a lot of other territories wrestling, and it's different. You get to Texas. They had a reputation for being what's called stiff-armed. So best example of this is a clothesline, where some guy's coming at you and you stick out your arm and supposedly hit him in the head or in the neck or something and cause him to fall over or whip over. And most territories, that would be something you would sell. You wouldn't actually put your arm out and have it be actually stiff that could hurt anybody. You'd sell it by the guy would come at it, and then you would move your arms such that it looked like he'd hit it and was going down. Texas was a little more stiff-armed. They'd actually hold it. You could run a risk of some. They got injured all the time, but you'd run more risk of injury in Texas. You get over to, and that was just because that's how they could sell it. Looked more real. You get over to Memphis, and it was a totally different ball game. Totally different. I can't even describe it very well, except to say that if an AWA wrestler went down to Memphis and didn't change what they did, they would be laughed out of the arena. And similarly, someone from Memphis. When Jerry the King Lawler, who was king, really, of Memphis wrestling, when he came up to the AWA to wrestle, which he did from time to time, he changed his act. Because if he didn't, he'd been laughed right out of the building. And I think that the fact that they had to sell these differently, that they had to, present them differently, is indicative that they had a slightly different culture. You're not dealing with a single culture in the United States. You're dealing with a dozen or more in real life. So now we get into a situation where we have nothing but power-mad sociopathic narcissists at the federal level. They don't care about all these individual cultures. If you're lucky, someone who is, a Florida a congressman or senator will care about his constituency just long enough to make sure that they vote for him or her. But they don't actually care about them very much. They care about consolidating their power so that they can run all of this. And that's why centralized government just doesn't work very well. You can't make a law that's going to govern someone. Here's about where my family's ranch land is right now, right up in there in South Dakota, middle of nowhere. You can't pass a law that's going to benefit someone in Chicago simultaneously benefiting someone in rural South Dakota. It just doesn't work. You can't do it. It's why the best laws are the ones that are closest to home. But they don't care about that. Not anymore. They don't care about it anymore. They want to run the whole shebang, and they can't. It's just not possible. So thinking about it, I have to ask myself, is it appropriate maybe? And boy, I never thought I'd ever say this. I've never wanted to necessarily come up with the idea, but do we have to think about breaking up the United States? And somebody came up with a map that I actually rather agree with, and for a number of reasons. Now, what they've got here in this map is not really a complete breakdown of where cultures differ, but they have it broken down enough that it would work. I think, for two reasons. One, well, this big green area here's Omaha, Nebraska, right? Modern day Omaha, Nebraska, million people, right? You get over to St. Louis. I don't know what the population is. It's fairly large, but it's not gigantic. And those are really the only two. I think Indianapolis may still be in there as well. Those are the only two really big cities in there. The rest of it tends to be very rural. And this, by the way, does include a lot of modern Illinois, at least half of modern Minnesota. And I've been to those places, and I would agree that in terms of economics, in terms of how those things operate, largely rural and agricultural, yeah, it makes some sense to carve it off that way. I don't know for sure what you say about this big chunk that is Texas and Nevada and everything almost to the West Coast. I don't know how culturally compatible they are because I've not lived there. I think they're more culturally compatible in terms of what they do economically than what I am. This other section, the brown section, yeah, I can say, okay, yeah, we're getting up into areas there, Montana and things like that. The Pacific Northwest parts of it that you say, okay, yeah, I've been to some of those. I can see where they have, a lot in common, at least in terms of what they look like they're doing economically. Similar thing here when you get into Minnesota, around the Great Lakes. I've been up in parts of Minnesota along the Great Lakes. Certainly lived in Chicago for 10 years. I know how that sort of works, and I think there's some, where you could say, yeah, that's very similar. Obviously, I think there's some crossover a lot in the South, and certainly in the Northeast. The other thing that this map does that I think is totally vital is it insulates large major metropolitan areas. Most of the worst parts of the eastern seaboard are stuck up here in this blue chunk. The big cities that are a real problem right now, Chicago, for example, Minneapolis, for example, over on the West Coast, the southern portion of California along the coast with the big cities. Up Pacific Northwest, when you get into Portland and to Seattle. What this map does is insulate them out. It cuts them off geographically. It would make it very difficult for Southern California's megalopoli, what I call really large cities, make it very difficult for Southern California's megalopoli to move west or east. It would make it very difficult. Chicago's a huge, giant problem. The reason they've got this, I'm sure, walled off the way that they do is because Chicago has fracked up the entire state. It is entirely due to Chicago that the state is in a miserable mess that it's in right now. Walling them off, keeping them out of another new country, keeping them out of what would be this sort of green country, because Omaha is not very far from Lincoln, that'd be an awesome thing. We could deal with Omaha, 1 million people. We could deal with St. Louis, been there a few times. You could deal with them. You could deal, I think I've only been through Indianapolis, but you could deal with them. Chicago, toxic, utterly toxic, needs to be cut off. Pacific Northwest, as we're saying now, toxic, utterly toxic, needs to be cut off. Southern California on the coast, toxic, utterly toxic, needs to be cut off. And you're left there on this border with Mexico. You're largely left with either this chunk of the South or, I guess you'd sort of call it the Southwest area. They can deal with the border as they feel like. The rest of us don't have to worry about it so much anymore. Unless, of course, they become bad neighbors and are allowing jillions of people to come up north. But I think essentially walling off the big cities, the huge major metro areas, from the rest of the other parts of these, what would be new countries, would be a grand thing. Partly because, as I say, I don't know for sure that individual liberty can survive urbanization, and partly because I know from having lived in Chicago that it is a nightmare. I can't think. I don't know what San Diego looks like right now, but I was in Southern California for my honeymoon, 1991. I'll never go again because everything I'm seeing about it looks like it's turned into a gigantic mess. Okay, well, if Southern California's coast wants to turn into a giant mess, if that's the way that their voters want to go, fine, let them do it, but keep it out of the rest of us. Similar deal with, Chicago. If they want to make a mess, fine. Let them do it with Minneapolis. Keep them out of my country. We will get along far better. Honestly, we would get along far better in this green part of the country where I would be. We would get along far better without any of those cities attached to us at all. They are a drain on the public coffers. They are filled with people. There's really no other way to say it. They're real snobs. They're real snobs. When I've worked with people in Southern California and Silicon Valley, they think I'm an idiot, despite the fact that I, in many cases, have done more in terms of building the internet and doing things with that than they have, but they still think that I'm an idiot. You see it in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Whenever she made some videos when she was driving through, I think, Texas, and she was like, oh, look at this, all this open space. Why should these people vote? Yeah, okay, you're really, really provincial, Alexandria. You do not understand how agricultural works, Alexandria, and you don't know that from Washington, D.C., you cannot make a law that's going to benefit people in New York and the people out in here at the same time. It will hurt one in favor of the other. That's all there is to it. And you don't know what you're doing when it comes to where I live at all. So I'm not sure that at this point, making a bunch of brand new nations that not only have more in common with what they are economically and geographically, but also wall off the worst of it from all the rest of it. The New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, all of them are miserable. Let them be miserable if that's what they want to be. Just make it so that I don't have to deal with it. If you guys want to make a socialist hellhole out of wherever you live, fine, do it. I don't care, as long as I don't have to bail you out or care about you in the slightest. Same thing with Southern California. If San Francisco wants to turn it into a literal crap hole, fine. If that's what your voters want to do, fine. Just make sure it isn't something I have to deal with. Don't let it bleed over. Same thing with the Pacific Northwest. If you want to let the Antifa have Portland and Seattle, fine. If that's what those people want to have, fine. Let them have it. Just make sure it's something I don't have to deal with. Let them burn down the place up there. As long as I don't have to deal with it, if that's what they want to do, fine. But I think at this point we may have to just consider, if we don't want out and out civil war widespread throughout the country, we may have to break the country up. I don't know what you would call these new nations, but I think breaking them up and walling off the worst offenders in terms of what what you see in terms of crime and socialism and just turning their own cities into pest holes. Let them turn it into a pest hole if they want to. Let Chicago go completely broke if it wants to. There's no reason to punish the rest of Illinois for what Chicago has done. There's no reason to punish the rest of Minnesota for what Minneapolis and the Twin Cities have done. There's no reason to punish the rest of the country for everything that the West Coast does or everything that happens in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know how you transition to this. I don't know how you transition to it. I would hope you would just say, well, we're going to do this peacefully. But to me, that seems like the best thing to do at this point. And you come down to things like, well, what about military assets? I'm kind of the opinion that, well, okay, if the military assets wind up being in here, if you have Offutt Air Force Base, which used to be Strategic Air Command for the entire United States in Omaha, I guess we keep it. Get up in this area and we've got, the Ellsworth Air Force Base, I guess we get to keep it. Other bases around in there, I guess we get to keep it. If the people on the West Coast want to deal with lots of naval traffic and stuff out of San Diego, let them keep it. Throws a lot of stuff in terms of international commitments that the U.S. has completely probably out the door. But it would allow for these new nations to make their own various types of treaties. For example, I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't have a treaty with my part of the country that's largely agricultural and say, well, we would like to have treaties with everybody else so that we will sell you stuff that we make, and if you actually make anything of value, we'll buy that from you. I think that would be good treaties to have. I think you would have to look at, Do you want to have these various countries having their own individual treaties with people like NATO? Treaties that the U.S. currently has with like Japan. Those fall into something of a difficult area to deal with. Maybe you just let those treaties die. And you say, okay, well, these new nations are going to have their own treaties. And that's how we'll operate. But I think you have to look at it and say, Washington isn't working. Our politics aren't working. At any level, they are not working. Why are they not working? Because we have a group of power-mad, sociopathic narcissists in Washington and large cities who think that they know better than everybody else. That they think that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, good old Red Cortez, thinks that she knows how to live my life better than I do. Sorry, Alexandria, you do not know how to live my life better. But you're sitting there in a position of power. No doubt in the next presidential election you'll run because you will be of age. And wouldn't that be a nightmare? Marshall is saying, well, Bill, I finally got the peer connection logic working 2 days late. Yeah, we could have another vote for all I know. Just as an example here, it's a contrast. Being able to look here. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one ratio of what I think are probably our actual, cultures in the U.S. versus where you might consider at least breaking this up. But it comes close. It comes very, very close. And I think this really, found this map and I went, oh, yeah, that's a good map. Because I think when you look at things, like I say, I've been a lot of this green area. I haven't been up to North Dakota, but I've been in a lot of it in my lifetime. Most of my lifetime has been spent somewhere in this green area, between basically the edge of the South Dakota, which is about over here, all the way to Chicago over here, and I've got some relatives that live farther than that. So most of my life's been lived in that area, and I can say, yeah, there's definitely a huge agricultural component to it. There's big cities there, but they are in the middle of agricultural land for the most part, and they're responsive to that because the entire region is dependent on agriculture. So I could say, okay, well, what cities there are there we can probably cope with, but not Chicago. You can't cope with Chicago. Chicago is a pest hole. I would never live there again. I was there at, I guess, what you would call the tail end of Chicago's heyday. After I was divorced and my ex moved there from where we were living in South Dakota, I went to see my kids once or twice a month, and every time I would drive out there, it would get more and more blighted. More and more things were shut down. More and more businesses were shut down. You'd go down to the Chicago Loop area, which used to be just teeming with businesses, and on parts of it in northern parts of Lake Michigan area, you'd have some bad house, lower end, not housing, but lower end businesses and stuff like that, and lower end hotels that were operating off of there. Gone. Just totally gone. By the time my kids were grown, tons and tons of things had completely shut down, and it was totally gone. Their roads were in poor repair. That's something they don't even do well here. Nowhere have I lived were the roads ever really good, with the exception of some small towns. Lincoln, Nebraska is the worst, absolute worst road ever, period, roads ever. I have never lived in it. I mean, I drive a Jeep Wrangler, which drives kind of like a truck. But, man, I have never driven roads like this. Near as I can tell, they've never done any road construction in the 20 or so years since I lived, more than that, 30 years or so since I lived here permanently. It's terrible. But if we were cut off from all of this giant rest of the drain on all of our money, we might be able to get something done. What most people don't realize, regardless of what your income bracket is, because of all of the taxation, about 50% of everything you earn goes to some taxes somewhere. When you get into even something as simple as making a pencil, right? Cutting down the tree, tax. Moving the tree to the sawmill, tax. Taking, the pencils that have been made out of that sawmill, tax. Driving them to a wholesaler, tax. Getting it from the wholesaler to the retailer, tax. Then you get your sales tax. when you look at it all, libertarians have theorized that if you didn't have taxation of every single good and service at every single possible point of production, our goods and services in the country would be 1/8 of what we actually pay for them. Cut this off from this horrifying drain on the economy, from these horrifying drains on the economy, from these horrifying drains on the economy. What do you get then? I think you get a hell of a lot more money left in your pocket, a hell of a lot better way to be more successful in your own life, in your own personal life. I do realize that I have actualized escape from L.A., Marshall says. Yes, I do know that. I guess you just call me Snake. I don't have an eye patch. Call me Snake. I ain't going to escape from it. Let them escape from it. I think if you did something like this and you cut up the U.S., there'd be a period where you'd say, okay, we will allow immigration for a while. And then after that, you're going to, free immigration. If you want to escape from L.A. and come to one of these other countries, okay, fine. We'll let you do that for 6 months. After that, you're going to have to go through a visa process and all that. You don't want too much coming out of here. You don't want too much coming out of here. You don't want much coming out of Chicago. Essentially walling them off, containing them to where their own economic damage, they can do it to themselves if they want to, but it doesn't hurt all the rest of us. They can do it to themselves if they feel like it. If their voters are so stupid that they want to have Antifa running wild in Portland and Seattle, fine, let them. But if they start coming out to my neck of the woods, then we can make laws and shut them down and send them all to jail. But if they want to keep doing it, let them do it. If these guys keep letting in all kinds of illegal immigrants, let them do it. That's fine. If they want to make their cities into pest holes, literal crap holes where people are crapping on the streets, leaving their syringes on the streets, homeless in massive numbers, so massive that guy I talk about who is a globetrotter, he's in Dubai right now. I just got an email from him. He's in Dubai at this moment. He has seen the worst of what India has to offer, and he's told me that in the times that because he used to live in Seattle, he was working for Boeing as a forensic engineer for a long time up there, and he says now that when he's driven through Southern California and the big cities there, he says it looks like a third world country. Okay, fine. If Southern California coast wants to be a third world country, fine. Let them be a third world country. Just make it so I don't have to worry about it anymore. Let us, I think this may be the only way to ultimately go. You have such decay in so many places that this may be the only possible way to go. It's either that or bloody civil war or an economic collapse caused by places like Chicago, Minneapolis, the entire northeastern seaboard, the entire Southern California seaboard, and then the violence and stuff that you see up here. Contain them all the way from the rest of us. So if they want to frack up where they live, if they want to live in pest holes in terrible conditions and give tons and tons of taxation away and never see much return on it, and if they think that that's going to be fine for them, fine. Let them destroy themselves if they want to. Just make it so that I don't have to care anymore. But yes, escape from L.A., escape from New York, escape from Chicago. There's one they could do. Escape from Chicago. Sadly, I think everybody is too old to do that anymore. Escape from L.A. was the last one. I'm weird that way, actually, Marshall. I'm one of the few people who actually kind of prefers escape from L.A. to escape from New York. I don't know why. I don't know why that is. It may just be the end of that film. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it. Snake Plissken is such a nihilist that what he does at the end is amusing to me on some level. But yes, actualized escape from New York. Yeah, absolutely. Based on what I've seen in videos, and I always have to take that with a grain of salt. I listen more to my friend who is the globetrotter, who can tell me I have been to horrifying parts of third world India, and then I drive through on the west coast of the United States, and I see the same thing. I'll take his word. I've seen certainly videos of, excrement in the streets and used needles in the streets in San Francisco and places that I went on my honeymoon, which is why I'll never go there again. I have very fond memories of that from 1991. I don't want to sully that with what it apparently has become now. Same thing with Los Angeles and San Diego. Los Angeles is turning into a literal crap hole too, apparently. Homelessness is such that, like my friend says, it's like a third world country. Los Angeles was a weird place, but I still have some fond memories of it. I don't want to sully that by seeing what it's turned into now. Same reason I don't want to go to New York City ever again. I have very, very fond memories of New York City. Very fond memories of New York City from just a few days that I spent there decades ago. But it's obviously at this point totally changed, completely changed. And I watched Chicago go completely down the toilet, and it is dragging the entire rest of this green part down with it. And there's no reason that should happen. That the people who are not living in the Chicagoland area are not responsible for what is happening to them. It is Chicagoland that's killing them. Wall them off. Let them do any damn thing they want. Just don't make me have to care about it. Marshall says, it's surfing down the flood control aqueducts. That's a classic. Yeah. That's fun. I really don't know quite what about, because I know that's silly and stupid. Surfing down a tidal wave. That seems kind of stupid to me. I know that's kind of stupid, but for some reason I still like that movie better than Escape from New York. I don't know. I don't have any good idea why. Maybe it's just some of the casting I like a little better. I don't know, but I do like the film a little better than Escape from New York. Escape from Chicago, that's certainly one you could do. Wall off the city of Chicago and don't let anybody escape. Blue Mustang says, did you hear the report about a sophisticated watermark that quietly placed an official election ballots to help catch fraud? I have not heard about that. Unsurprisingly, the number of things that I've heard about versus the things that I haven't heard about are probably massive. There are more things that I don't know about, I'm sure, than I do. It is getting impossible to even deal with. We just don't know anymore. I don't trust the press to tell me the truth. I know that James O'Keefe is telling some level of the truth, and that's clearly showing election fraud. I don't even know that I could say for sure that my own area is not free of election fraud. I don't know anymore. It is impossible at this stage of the game to even guess. I think if you were going to do it, you would have to just say, okay, forget it. We're going to tear the whole thing down, and we're going to have a brand new election under totally different circumstances. But that's never going to happen. That is a pipe dream. That will never happen. However, if you did something like this, I think those of us in this green part could figure out how to hold a good election, without actually getting any serious problems. I think we'd figure that out one way or the other. Marcia says, oh God, the death blossom rumor. There's no actual evidence to support it. Okay, who knows? That's the whole problem with this whole vote. Spent 6 freaking hours in this chair. I assumed that we'd have at least some notion about who was going to be president. No, we didn't. At the end of the night, we didn't. We still don't for the next 2 days. It's 2 days after the election. We still don't. The reason I don't have a lot of prepared remarks tonight is precisely because it just went on and on and on and on. You're hearing this and you're hearing that, seeing this and seeing that. I mean, you see anecdotal videos on YouTube of people taking, cameras, on YouTube, but on Twitter, of stuff that looked really damn shady. You have James O'Keefe documenting stuff that looks really damn shady. You have other things that, are just rumors that look really damn shady. You have the press, the media propaganda complex, who will not tell you the truth at all. They will always fall in for the Democrat. So you don't know what to believe, if anything, out of them. My general thing is don't ever believe anything. There's so much going on that we have no freaking clue. We have no idea, and it's just so hard. Unless you're, a complete masochist, and I know that I know Marshall kind of is a masochist about it, but unless you're a complete masochist, I don't know how you make heads or tails of it anymore. It is so far beyond anything that I have ever seen in any election ever in my lifetime. And the weird thing is, it started with Iowa. I lived in Iowa for 10 years. I live in a state, Nebraska, that borders Iowa. That Democratic primary was intentionally screwed up by the Democratic Party. People who live in Des Moines and Iowa are absolutely livid about the whole thing because it makes the state look bad, despite the fact that until that primary, they had never had a problem doing it. And the reason they did it was real simple. Every Democrat that I know wanted to vote for Bernie. And the Democratic Party was very afraid that if he got the media bump that the person who wins that always gets, because it's a damn useless media circus, and that's all it is. They were afraid that if he got that bump, that he might actually end up winning the nomination. So they made that into a terrific, horrible nightmare that didn't make any sense on any level. By the time they got that all taken care of, you could have driven from every single precinct, with the caucus results. You could have driven those all to the Des Moines DNC by hand. You could have had all those counts in by hand rather than doing it electronically, the stupid way they did it. I'm sure that it was set up specifically so that it would be looking screwed up, and people in Iowa hate it because it makes them look like idiots. And they had never had a caucus like that before, and I doubt they will ever have it again. It was intentional. Now we have all this crap going on, and I think it's probably intentional to some degree. I think the Democrats are saying, we don't know, we've got to win this. So they are intentionally throwing a lot of monkey wrenches into the work, if not intentionally doing just outright voter fraud in order to win this election. Yeah, Marshall says, proud data masochists of the world, unite. Feel free. Marshall's a good old friend, and I will believe things that he tells me because he's masochistically on top of this even more than I am. I have, at this point, kind of thrown up my hands in disgust. I said, I don't have the slightest freaking clue what is going on, and I'm not sure that we ever will. Whomever ends up being president the next time, I don't know that we will ever know if that president was elected fairly. If it's Trump, I don't know that we'll know if he was elected fairly. If it's Biden, I don't know that we'll know if he was elected fairly. That's never happened in my lifetime, where I could point to a federal election and say, I don't know if this is real. Now, just prior to my lifetime, it is probably the case that JFK was elected due to election voter fraud in Chicago. That's probably the case. But outside of then, I don't think you could look at any election, federal election in my lifetime and say, God, what a gigantic nightmare that we will never know the truth about. We will just never know. It's one of the things that does not work anymore. There are so many things that don't work. Those various factors that I went through that just are incompatible, that don't work anymore. That's why I'm beginning to think it's time to just break up the U.S. Break it up into separate sections where they can then make their own laws that make a lot more sense to them. Up here, when we're not taxing every single thing that we get and manufacture and make inside of here at every single possible point of production, and we're all going home and only paying 1/8 or maybe more, a quarter, a half of what we are now for all of our goods and services. And it gives us the opportunity, too, by the way, to break up some of the media propaganda and big tech propaganda complexes that we have. Marshall's saying there's data, then there's opinion and bias. I can be for one side or another, but my analysis of the data is only based on the data, which is why I am pretty quiet right now. The data is all suspect. Yeah, I can't tell. I can't tell at all. I have no idea. But what I do know is it isn't working anymore. This is really a good example of it. This election is a good example of how this stuff ain't working no more. It's just not working. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's just time. The other thing is this also gives us the opportunity to break up some of these propaganda complexes that we have going on. Much as you might like to think so, it is not true that there is no IT going on here in this green part of the country. We have multiple Google data centers. We have multiple Facebook data centers. We have a couple of Twitter data centers. We have all kinds of IT that I've done in this green area because I've lived most of my life between its two borders. And I've worked in those areas. Guys in Silicon Valley, guess what? You are not the end-all and be-all of technology. You are driving it right now. But if we said in our green area, well, if you want to work here, then you have to do this in terms of your policies. You cannot be, if you're Twitter, well, okay, fine. If you want to censor the president of whoever is, the People's Republic of California, if you want to censor that president, fine, censor him. But we will not let you censor the president of whatever we call this green area. You can almost call it it's not quite all of the Louisiana Purchase, but, I don't know what you'd call it. Central Upper Great Plains, I don't know, states or something. I would certainly suggest, too, by the way, that they keep individual state boundaries because you want your laws to be as local as humanly possible. And I would suggest that they adopt the letter of the Constitution, not its spirit, its letter, what it says, limited number of things that you can do, and then everything else is left to the states or the people. I would certainly suggest that and stick to it. But again, when you've got things that are more local, that do not have the drag on you that these socialist areas that are turning themselves into complete nightmares are, when you have taken them out of the equation, I think your life is going to get quite a lot better. You do have to worry about invasion by foreign nations. No doubt China would love to see something like this. No doubt Russia would like to see something like this. And there are allies of the United States that might suffer as a result of this. But ultimately, I think you have to look at what's best for you. You can't say, okay, NATO might be in a problem if the U.S. ceased to exist and all of these other countries came into existence. Okay, NATO might. But the problem is right now, we're all suffering. And it's all due to only a few places. And if you broke it up, I don't think you'd all be suffering that much. And then maybe you could have your own treaties. It's not like there aren't a lot of people who are in the military who aren't from these green areas. There's an enormous number of people. They're brought up very much to think in terms of, duty to their country. A lot of military comes out of that area and other areas as well. It's not like it's confined military only ever come out of California or only ever come out of Chicago or only ever come out of New York City. A lot of them come out of here. So we might very well be able to set up our own militaries. And like I say, as far as I'm concerned, we get to keep, if it's green area, we get to keep Offutt and Ellsworth Air Force bases and everything in them. That just turns into ours from now on. Anybody else that's got them, they can keep theirs. One says, Bill, can't the Supreme Court save Trump presidency? I have no idea. No idea. I don't know. I don't even know if he won. I have no idea who won this time around. Marcel's saying Silicon Valley is a very dense nexus of tech, but there are many others: New York, Dallas, Boston, Chicago, Raleigh, Seattle, Asheboro, North Carolina, where you live. Yeah. Des Moines, has a very large Facebook data center. The Omaha area has 2 very large Google data centers. There are data centers throughout the area that I've worked in at various times. They are big drivers right now, but if you said to them, well, if you're going to be allowed to continue to work in our green area, then you have to stay out of our politics. And the moment that you're not, screw you. Some of our guys are going to build our own. You are not the only thing in the world over here. You're a big driver of it, but you're not the only brains in the universe. We got some big brains over here as well. And big brains down there about where you are. So... Marshall says SCOTUS has to have a case to act. They don't generally act unilaterally as the original jurisdiction of a case. SCOTUS is largely where cases that came from lower courts end up in if they move out of the lower courts. SCOTUS oftentimes will just say agree with the lower court ruling or send it back to them to retry. I'm unclear what they would rule on in this particular case. May come down to something like 2000 when they had the hanging chads thing, where they just had to say, okay, that's it. We're going to stop counting and recounting all of Florida's votes. It may just come to that. But in any case, it's so widespread. I don't know where you start with it. I don't know that I can trust my own local place. I don't know that I can trust that. It is the first time in my life I can look at a federal election and say, I don't trust any of it anymore. I don't know where a fair count has been made and where it hasn't been made, and where there has been voter fraud and where there hasn't. I can certainly look at some stuff and say, that looks really damn fishy to me. I can look at James O'Keefe's videos and say, that looks really damning to me. But I can't say for certain that something similar isn't going on in my local post office that he's uncovered at other post offices, and that seem to be popping up in other postal locations. I don't know that they weren't doing that here. I don't know that necessarily everyone's vote was counted. I assume it was, but I don't know. I can't tell anymore. There's so much corruption and it's so widespread that I can't tell. This is a horrific election, and I think it may, to some extent, have been engineered by the Democrats. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about it. I just know it looks fracked up beyond all repair. Blazer 101 says, Bill, with all this cheating going on right now, what can Trump do? I guess what he's doing, which is going after some of the low-hanging fruit and saying, okay, wait a minute, like we want to have access. We want to, see how things are happening, because they weren't allowing access to that side. Only one side was being allowed access to how they were doing the vote counting and tabulation and all that. That's wrong, So he filed some suits regarding that. But I don't even know that Trump won. I don't know if Trump won or not. It was a squeaker regardless. But I don't know whether he actually won. Maybe he didn't. Maybe if you ran a fair election that you could actually have some confidence in, maybe he didn't even win. I don't know. There's just no way to know. First time in my lifetime that's ever happened. I have never, ever seen this in the United States. It is totally without precedent. And he may have won, he may not. Biden may have won, he may not. If he held a fair election, I have no idea what it would look like. All I know is this looks fishy as hell. It doesn't seem to be working anymore. This seems to be the capper on a whole long litany of things that I went through about, how things aren't working. And we have incompatible beliefs, incompatible economics, incompatible everything. This is the capper. This is the icing on the cake that says to me, this just is busted. And I don't know if it can be repaired. The best thing I can think of, and maybe to avoid civil war, start breaking off into individual countries and letting more local things run ourselves. Blazer 101 says the media is getting ready to call it for Biden. Yeah, the media propaganda complex at work. They will. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Always. Anytime I bring it up in any meaningful way, I have linked to, and there is now a great 1080p copy of the 1931 film, The Front Page. I just pulled it down from YouTube to have it for my own use because I don't like relying on things like that on YouTube to stay there forever. But there's a link to a very good 1080p copy of it, so go and watch that and see just how untrustworthy they have always been. But this time around, they are outright censoring things. They are outright spiking stories. Anything that would make Trump look good or anything that would make Biden look bad, it goes out the window, just gone. And none of these guys, with the exception of, I'm blanking on his name now, one who actually quit from Intercept, I think. Only one to have even the slightest bit of ethics. Not that I ever expected ethics out of people who lie for a living, which is what they do. You have to remember, too, because I dated for a while a woman who went on to be a news anchor. And if you don't make it up to the national level, which, all the cities and towns around the country, most journalists don't make it up to the national level, When you don't make it up to the national level, guess what these guys go and do when it's all over for them in journalism, especially when they're in front of the camera, and especially if you're a woman. You have to be young and attractive, and in front of a camera. If you're a woman, you get too old, you're done. If your weight goes a certain way, you're done. Guess what they all go to do? They go into marketing. An entire business whose job it is to kind of lie to you, because they've been doing it. That's what they do. They lie for a living. And so marketing isn't that big of a stretch anymore. It's just lying for a living. But you can't, and part of the reason too that it would be good to have this sort of breakup. Not only do you give the opportunity to break up what big tech propaganda machine is doing as well, you also have the opportunity to begin to break up what's going on with some of this stuff, because you can say, okay, CNN, right? You're based out of Atlanta down here, right? Okay. So if you want to cover anything that's going on outside of this red area, you have to do it fairly. We'll have watching. We'll watch, and it gives the opportunity to hear. There are lots of reporters. There are lots of different people who would be happy to try to compete with CNN if CNN wasn't the only thing going on in the country. If Fox News wasn't the only thing going on in the entire country. What would you have in terms of your entertainment if it wasn't only coming out of this place right here in the blue? What would that look like? I always used to hope that maybe YouTube would break that, but YouTube made that about impossible. It's still coming out of Hollywood or up in Canada, but they still suffer from the same problem as Hollywood, California. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. And it comes out in their entertainment. It comes out in things like Star Trek, which I'm a fan of, but they're screwing up royally now with their woke politics, and they're aiming their lowbrow, stories and aiming crap that's just, aimed purely at the woke and has no grounding in reality or what we've seen in Star Trek. What would it look like if there was a science fiction series produced out of Lincoln, Nebraska? Lincoln has a large PBS studio. It is very large. It is the studio at which they actually filmed the first episode of Sesame Street. They have at least 3 studios that I'm aware of in there, one of which is very large. What would it look like if something like The Orville was produced out of that studio? What would it look like? They have some other studios in Omaha that are pretty big. They have some others, I'm sure, in St. Louis. What would it look like if we had entertainment coming out of there instead of solely just here? What would it look like? I don't know, but I think it would look better. It would be more diverse in any case. You wouldn't, if you're making entertainment in here, you're not going to be aiming it necessarily at the woke who live over here, or the woke that live here in Chicago, or the woke that live in Eastern Seaboard. That's not going to fly very well here. What would it look like? Would we have the opportunity to break some of the monopoly that the press propaganda complex has over us right now? Laser 101 says, if the elections get held up, would Pelosi be the president? Well, what's supposed to happen is the House of Representatives is supposed to choose the president in the event of a contested election. If you just can't decide. And in that case, they get 1 vote per state. I don't know how the hell that would go down. I don't think Pelosi is in line. You'd have to have, I don't know how she'd get in there in those circumstances. I think they're still going to keep the House. So who becomes president is probably kind of a toss-up. I don't know for sure. It might be that since you're only getting 1 vote per state, it could still go Republican and Trump would be in, but then I think you'd have a serious problem. I think you'd probably see a real shooting war if that happened. I think that would, right now the Antifa and the scumbags are all too confused. It's one of the few things that we can say that came good out of this. I was really expecting the riots to start if Trump had won, but now they're all confused and they don't know what the hell to do with themselves. That's one of the few bright spots to come out of this. But if he is awarded it by the House, I think you can just say, okay, forget it. We're going to see it then. Dalton asks, do you think secession could actually happen? I'm a big proponent of it. I don't know. I don't know if it could happen or not. Problem is, these guys over here in D.C., who are, as I said, power-mad, sociopathic narcissists who want to rule the entire country. I don't know if that would work. I don't know. You'd have to have a very large number of people who are in favor of it so that they wouldn't fight with each other. I don't know if it could actually be done. But I'm throwing it out there because it looks to me like one of the few ways that you might do it that would keep it from becoming an all-out, nasty, horrible war. You know, if you could just say, okay, we are going to peacefully just say, all right, we're going to go our own separate ways. If that could happen, which I don't think it could, but if it could happen, that might avoid an actual shooting civil war. Marshall says the 12th Amendment applies if the states are unable to reach a absolute majority by electoral college date. If that's the case, the House votes, 1 vote per state based on delegation composition. Yeah. If the House deadlocks, the Speaker is appointed acting president, and the Senate meets in March to resolve the election. Okay, Marshall is more up on that than I am. So I guess there would be a path, conceivably, for Nancy Pelosi to be president for a 3-month or so, 2.5-month period. I don't know. One hopes it wouldn't go that far, but geez, after all this, I ain't predicting nothing anymore on this. This election is such a gigantic, horrible mess that I am not predicting anything more out of it. I just don't know. I don't know what it looks like. It is a giant mess that I can't make heads or tails of. I leave it to my good friend Marshall to have some idea of statistics because he's really good at that. But from me, it's just like I can't even tell anymore. I just can't tell. It all looks monstrously horrifying. If it were me, if I had the power to do it, I would just say, screw this, throw out this entire election. Let's have a new one. And you know, we'll have oversight to make sure that there isn't this kind of voting fraud going. I mean, serious oversight. I don't know where you get that oversight that isn't somehow tainted. That's the problem with this whole thing, is it's so tainted because the oversight is biased in some fashion or another on many, many different levels. I don't know where you find it. The country has made an election that looks very much like a banana republic. It's just a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. Yeah, Marshall says the founders were pretty smart cookies. Yes, for the most. Yeah, if they actually paid attention to the Constitution, that would be great. Blazer asks, "Why do I feel scared, and why are you so calm?" I'm also very nervous. I think we're in a holding pattern for something that could go very south. I'm not even sure. I don't know where this goes. I don't know where it goes. I don't think the ultimate outcome is pretty. I just don't know where it's going to go. Maybe the best thing that could happen would be for Biden to win in some apparently fair fashion. Because I don't think that Republicans are going to go insane the way the Democrats do. Republicans have a pretty long history. Excuse me. The Republicans have a pretty long history of just saying, okay, we lost this time around, we have to do better next. Democrats, for the last 4 years, have had a history of going off completely into an alternate universe that doesn't exist. And if their guy doesn't win this time around, if it has to be handed out by the House or the Senate, and it comes down for Trump, I don't know what they'll do. I don't see it going down well. They're insane. They at this point have lost all contact with reality. And I don't know what happens. I just don't know. It is entirely up in the air. I can't tell how this election went for real. I can't tell who actually won for real. It's a banana republic election. Never seen it in my lifetime. Never once. Marshall says, uncertainty breeds fear in most people, but elections, almost by definition, are uncertain things. If you're ruled by emotion, the fear escalates to dangerous levels. And that's what I worry about with the side on the left. They're already terrified by Trump, period. They have been convinced of things about him by the press propaganda complex that is totally false. He's a narcissist. You know, when I talked about power-mad sociopathic narcissism, no question in my mind that man is a narcissist. But he's not as bad as everybody thinks. You know, we've had narcissists in office before. They have been told lies and lies and lies and lies and lies about him so much that they believe the lies and they believe the press. And the press is totally untrustworthy. Please, if you do nothing else after watching my stream, click on that front page one and just watch it through. I warn you, there's some rather blatant racism in it. This was, of course, 1931. So, you know, you got to kind of look past that and say, okay, well, that you're talking about, you know, stuff that was common in the era. There's some blatant racism in it, but watch those reporters. Then adjust for modern technology. Instead of them having, you know, phones with a, you know, thing to the ear and a mouthpiece down here, give them a cell phone instead. You know, and instead of them filing stories by calling up for rewrite, type them out right here. Adjust for technology, and you'll see nothing has changed. Not a damned thing has changed. The way those reporters act, the behavior that comes from the writers of that story, because they were journalists of the time, it's exactly the same. They shouldn't be trusted, and yet this whole huge segment of our population still trusts them. Even, you know, to some extent, even people on the right still trust them, and I don't understand. I'm seeing a lot of backlash on Fox News. They thought Fox News was somehow trustworthy. Guess what, guys? It never was. Fox News was just a shill for the Republicans. They were not fair and balanced, and they never were. They were shilling for the Republicans. They were never trustworthy. You don't trust anybody in the press. They can't get it right if they're trying to report on a cat being taken out of the tree by the firemen down the street. It's just they can't get it right even when they're trying, and most of the time they're not trying. They're shilling. You don't trust any of them. You know, you want to trust something, listen to first responder frequencies linked to in my description box as always. If you want to trust somebody, watch James O'Keefe. Watch citizen journalism on the ground when something's happening, where they're just pointing their cameras and not saying anything, and they're not bleeping anything, they're not censoring anything, they're not editing anything, they're just seeing the footage, and you decide what you think about it. But don't trust anybody who's typing words out. You know, you want to get into the showmanship aspect of it, right? Just the showmanship aspect of it. Whenever you see one of these talking heads, right, it's just like me. You know, for the most part, occasionally some of them have real sets. But for the most part, they're just sitting in front of a desk with a green screen behind them. And the green screen is made up to look like a busy newsroom or something that gives them legitimacy. It's not really like that. They're sitting in a small studio, the same size as mine, with a green screen behind them, showing an image. And it's a little nicer green screen than mine. You can see the lines around me from time to time, and you don't see it so much with them. But they're still just sitting at a green screen. It's all fake. It's not real. It's just showmanship. And then you get into things about how they do the news. You know, if you're CNN or Fox or somebody like that, you got a talking head here, and he's reading off his teleprompter. This guy hasn't done any actual research or anything like that. He doesn't go out and cover these stories. He's got a teleprompter sitting in front of him. He's reading off what is, okay, blah, 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 blah. And there's some people in, an office someplace that say, who have the instructions, get a new story in front of this guy every 15 minutes or you're fired. So they just go on the internet and they find something, anything. Okay, here's something. I can edit it down a little bit, switch some words around, and okay, we got it out in front of the guy. Do I fact check it? No. They never fact check. One of the biggest things that I debunked one time was when President Obama was in, and he was having a state visit to India. And the press started reporting that he was taking what amounted to 1/3 of the U.S. Navy with him. 2 entire carrier groups they were reporting. Now, as it happens, I am not a military expert, but I did spend 1 semester in naval ROTC in college. And so I heard that and I went, whoa, 2 carrier groups? That's insane. And yet they were reporting it. They were saying and taking all of these things. Well, I looked it up. There were 2 carrier groups. There were nowhere. It was public knowledge where these carrier groups are. Did they check? Did they look? No. There was no carrier groups anywhere in the vicinity. The closest one was the USS Truman, I think, carrier group that was in the Gulf, doing joint military exercises with some of the Gulf state nations. And that's thousands of miles away. That's half an ocean away. They didn't check that stuff. They just went around saying, is it true the president's going to be, taking all of these things with him? And the Navy people were like, no, that's not true. But the slightest knowledge about naval, parlance and how they work and how the number of ships that a carrier group represents, the smallest amount of research would have cured you of it. But they didn't. What happened was, and I found the original story, what happened was they'd gone with a story, I think that came out of Dubai newspaper. And they were claiming that all of this stuff was coming and they were going to have 5 bajillion cops on the streets because it's India and he's making a state visit and they want to frighten their populace into believing there is absolutely no way that you will be able to assassinate a U.S. president on Indian soil. So they wrote up a pack of lies in this Dubai article, and I found it and I went, this is where they're getting their stupid stuff from. But they're too dumb to know that what amounts to it like a third of the Navy, and they're too ill-informed and stupid to know how to even look this stuff up. It took me 5 minutes. I just went, carrier group assignments. Bingo, there they all were throughout the entire world. Where's the nearest one? The Gulf. What is it doing? Well, each ship has its own freaking website. They were posting pictures of stuff, like football games on shore. They weren't doing anything. It's just having these joint naval operations. It was ridiculous, but they're too stupid. They don't have the information. They don't know how to look that stuff up. They're just somebody who's going back there says, "Geez, we got to get a new story in front of this guy in 15 minutes." There's one. Okay, I'll throw it in front of him. I don't care about the facts. Just get it out to him. They do it all the time. Even if they're trying, they can't get it right. They've got to have a news story in front of that talking head every 15 minutes, whether it's true or not. And they couldn't care less. Blazer 101 says, Bill, if Trump doesn't stop the mail-in ballots now, the Democrats are going to use it in 2022 and so on to get rid of all the Republicans. I don't even think I'd allow mail-in ballots anymore. Just put an end to it. It's clear from James O'Keefe reporting that there is clearly ballot tampering going on at the Postal Service. And there are multiple locations. Apparently, from the guy that he talked to, a whistleblower on the inside, the Postal Service generally tends to be very liberal, aiming towards Biden, which is why what they're doing, what they've been caught red-handed by O'Keefe doing, because this insider, the whistleblower told him, is they said if you get something that a mail-in ballot that comes in after the 3rd, postmark it the 3rd anyway. Because it had been settled by the Supreme Court that it had to be postmarked by the 3rd in order to be counted. And they said, no, just postmark it, backdate it. And they're doing it in multiple places. For all I know, they could be doing it here in Lincoln, Nebraska. I have no idea. I wouldn't have them at all anymore. I would just get rid of them completely. I don't know if Trump can do that, but, if it comes down to having it done at a legal level by the state Senate and the House, forget it. It's never going to change. It's never going to change. That's why breaking up the United States starts to make some level of sense, because it's not going to change. Our governmental entities at the federal level no longer work. They're corrupt through and through. And that goes for all of the alphabet soup agencies. Everybody wants to say about how the FBI, they're the premier law enforcement agency in the world. No, they're not. They have been dirty since day one. Look at what J. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI, did. And nobody's changed since then. It's been all the same stuff. It's not to say that your average, agent that I might have dealt with, like when I was reporting that one website, I think they're trying to do their best, but you get up to a certain level and it just goes completely off into the deep end, and they're totally corrupt. When you're trying to control every last human being in a nation this size, it becomes corrupt. That's why I think probably we have to break up the United States. Reduce the capability of becoming so corrupt, at least for a while. Maybe for a century, maybe 2 centuries. I think this is probably just an outgrowth, ultimately, of what government turns into. You have power-mad sociopathic narcissists, and they do nothing but grab more power, grab more power, grab more power, a little bit at a time, so nobody really notices. So nowadays, because they don't teach it, they don't teach anything. People don't even know what the Constitution is. They haven't read it. They don't know what it means. They don't know just how much power is being abused by the people in Washington. And then we get stuff like this stupid election as a result. Third world banana Republican election. What's going to happen to us under Joe Biden for the next 4 years? I have no freaking clue. The best you can probably say is if the Democrats have the House, Republicans have the Senate. Hopefully the Republicans won't decide that they need to work together. That's the worst thing that can ever happen. When 2 parties work together, you're screwed. Hopefully that means there'll be a deadlock for 4 years. I think that's the best you could hope for. It doesn't mean he won't do unconstitutional executive orders. They all do that. There have been so few executive orders in my lifetime that would be considered constitutional. They make law via executive order. They just bypass the legislative branch and make law by executive order. So he might do some more of that. I'm never going to run. Don't ask me to. But if I ever ran for president as a libertarian, for example, the first thing I would do would be sign an executive order that says all prior executive orders are hereby null and void, and get rid of them all simultaneously. If there's something that needs to be put in later, fine, we'll figure it out. But right now, there's so much law that's being created by executive order that I would just get rid of them all. Get rid of every last one of them. But under Biden, I have no idea what will happen. Just not a clue. I think what the obvious thing will happen is he is sadly suffering from some level of senile dementia. I don't think that he would last his term. I think that at some point he would have to stand down and resign, and then we would get oh man, that would be nasty. Well, we'd get Kamala Harris as president, and then she would have to nominate someone as a vice president. Hopefully it wouldn't be somebody like Nancy Pelosi, but she'd have to nominate somebody like vice president. It'd be roughly like what we saw serially happen with the Nixon administration. He resigned. Let's see. His vice president, Spiro Agnew, resigned first. Then he got Gerald Ford as the new vice president, and then he resigned, and Gerald Ford became the president, and then he nominated one of the Rockefellers as vice president, and so it was just a giant mess. I don't think you'd see it, hopefully not that messy, but, who knows. I think you wouldn't have Biden around for a full 4 years. I think he'd have to, step down at some point. Let's see. Will Joe Biden use his executive order to bring in the Green New Deal? I don't know. I don't know if he could get away with it or not. I don't know. There's probably executive orders that he could do that would be considered consistent with other executive orders in the past and might be left to that. I don't know. My fear is that the longer that the large metro areas in these places that should be contained off so that the damage they do to everyone else can be limited, will be so pervasive that even in a Republican-controlled Senate, they might decide to start working together. They might decide, oh, okay, the environment really, there's really all kinds of climate change happening that we're doing. We should reach across the aisle and work together. That is the worst damn thing that ever happens. The best you can ever hope for in Washington is deadlock, gridlock. Nothing moving, nothing happening. That is the best you can possibly hope for out of them at this point. No man's wallet is intact. is wallet is safe while Congress is in session. Marshall says all spending bills shall originate in the House. Yes, except that doesn't happen anymore. We've seen them originate in the Senate. They don't care. It's just part of the Constitution they don't pay attention to anymore. Dropper 2 says, wow, you're still going. What did I miss? There's an on-demand, of course. Yeah, I'm still going. I'm not sure how much longer I'll be going, but I am still going. Is Trump's border gone under Joe Biden? No, but see, what happened with the border was not this thing where they're building a wall. They did some of that. But the real thing that happened was Trump said to Mexico, hey, you have to be a buffer now. You have to, if you don't stop people coming up, then we will, we're going to not trade with you anymore. And Mexico went, oh, okay, all right, we'll stop them. And that's pretty much what happened. I think what would happen is all that you would see would be a fading away of reporting on stories on the border. The same thing that happened under Obama. I mean, he created much of the problem down there, but they didn't report on it at the time. And the only reason that you're aware of it now is because they shined a spotlight on it. I think they just stopped shining spotlights on it. He would probably still have some level of border control, but nobody would question him about it anymore. The assumption now, due to the media propaganda complex, is that Trump is a racist, and that's why he's doing these things. But when you stop doing that, when you stop saying your president's a racist and you stop paying attention to those things, I can probably keep doing what's going on now, and it won't be a problem. I don't know. I don't think Biden himself has any great love for letting just anybody come across the border. He's said stuff like that solely to get elected. But I don't know that you'd see any significant change other than the press would stop pointing a camera at anything that looks bad down there. Drop Truth asks, is it true that the Republicans still control the Senate? Well, I don't know. It looks like they do. I don't know if they actually won. It's impossible to tell. Dalton asks, I honestly don't think Biden would push for the Green New Deal. He's way closer to the establishment, which isn't really socialist. It's socialist enough to be bad. But I don't know what would happen. He's clearly beholden to them. But by the same token, without it being Trump and the press not constantly being, negative about him, he could probably get away with doing anything he wanted, in terms of, or not doing something. I don't know what he'd do. He's certainly got younger generation like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez going out and screaming her lungs out, and she's not particularly intending to be beholden to anybody. She might scream a lot, and certainly the people, the woke who are watching Star Trek Discovery, they'll still whine about it if nothing happens. If nothing happens, that would be the best thing. If nothing happens, they will ultimately learn their lesson inside of about 20 or 30 years when they have, like me, seen pronouncements of doom, gloom, and catastrophe constantly for the last 55 years, none of which has ever come true. That's what this is now. It's never going to come true. It's not science even. Drop of Truth says Nancy Pelosi is president, Marshall president. Her son is implicated in the Hunter laptop. Conflict of interest. Well, it's not a conflict of interest when your press won't tell anybody about it. But it doesn't matter. That whole laptop thing is a non-issue because the media propaganda complex has suppressed it, has suppressed all news about it, and it's very hard to find it. And in any case, even if they weren't suppressing it, your average Democrat who has lost contact with reality will not believe it. They won't believe anything that's in there that's incriminating. I mean, hell, they're saying the whole thing is a Russian job. Really? And by the way, whoever had that laptop, you still got the copies. I still want to make a torrent out of it. Call me. I want to make a torrent out of that thing. I think those drives should be made public in unredacted form for anyone to see, and put onto a platform like BitTorrent where it will never disappear. I'll seed it for 2 hours out of Amazon Web Services, and then it will be everywhere, and it'll be a healthy torrent for the rest of its life. And it can be in the gigabyte range. It doesn't matter. People are downloading gigabytes worth of data now. Boy, if you see some of the high-end pirated video, I mean, for God's sake, when you can download all of Star Trek, the original series, in one gigantic torrent, each episode being about 1.2 gigabytes in size. I got 10 terabytes of storage. Only a third half of it is full, and a bunch of it is videos of various kinds. I can fit gigabytes upon gigabytes in there. That's the whole point. Lots of people can nowadays. So call me. Give me that stuff so I can make a torrent. Drop of Truth says Biden presidency would turn the USA into a socialist dictatorship. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but then it's the economy would fail, U.S. petrodollar would be replaced, and the country is doomed. The petrodollar failing is always a significant problem if that happens, and it would collapse the U.S. dollar, and followed by that a governmental collapse. Another reason to do this, what if my part of the country decided that we're going to, base our currency on gold and silver, and we're out of that. We don't have that problem. If you guys over here want to bet on something that doesn't have anything backing it, if you guys over here want to bet on something that doesn't have anything backing it, it dies on you, fine. You're insulated from the rest of us. We're still doing gold and silver. I don't know that would happen, but, maybe they'd be smart that way. Marcia says the only disqualifiers for the presidency is age and being a felon. So, yes, she could assume the presidency. Yeah. Drop 2 says the Hunter vids, I shouldn't say that name, the videos connected with that individual who is related to the person who was running for president are ridiculous. The feet shown in the foot job are allegedly his niece, not a Chinese hooker. I don't know. I don't care. I just want to see the whole laptop hard drives. I want to see them all. I want to see everything. Totally unredacted. I want to see it all. Drop says that's an assumption. There's no objective evidence either way on that point. Yeah, I don't know. I just want to see it. Drop Truth says these people need to win prison now, and that will never happen. Blazer says, Bill, can Trump still win this election? That is a point, or does he have to go to the courts? Well, again, it won't fall to the courts unless there's something to adjudicate. In the event of an election where there is no electoral, neither side has the proper number of 270 votes to get elected, then it will go to the House of Representatives, and if they can't deal with it, Nancy Pelosi will be president until March, at which point the Senate will then try to decide it. So I don't think that's I don't think that there's anything that will necessarily go to the courts, unless it's something like happened in 2000, where the Supreme Court finally had to be gone to, and they said, no, okay, you've done like 15 bajillion recounts in Florida. It's going to stop now so that we can call this election. Drabitsu says, that's why I said allegedly, yeah. How can the Supreme Court adjudicate on this debacle? Well, they can't, really. There's nothing to adjudicate as of yet. Trump has some suits in place to look at some of the ones that have yet to be called because they look fishy and they've been denied access to the way the ballots are being counted. And so that can be adjudicated. But beyond that, there's really no way that the Supreme Court gets involved. It goes Electoral College. If that doesn't work out, then the House. If that doesn't work out, then the Senate. Along the way somewhere, it's going to be decided. If not in the House, then in the Senate early next year. What states are still in play? Oh, God, I'm not even sure anymore. I know... Let me see if I can find the election map I was using before. I can't find it anymore. It was on C-SPAN. I know they've got, oh, here we go. Michigan is having a suit of some kind. Wisconsin is being, recounts being demanded. I think Nevada may still be undecided. Georgia and maybe South Carolina. I think, not sure if Pennsylvania's in yet or not. This map I'm looking at may be a little old. So I'm not sure if Georgia has been decided yet. It's such a constantly evolving situation that I frankly have not been able to keep up on it. There's so much crap that's going on. There's Georgia's election results 2020 live by county. Well, it's close. It's really, really close. That's why it hasn't been called yet, I don't think. They both show about 49.4% each presently, according to NBC News. So it's crazy. It's just crazy. Do I have any good news for Trump? You're running out of hope. He could win. He could win. That's a possibility. He could win. I don't know. To me, I can't tell if he won or not. Fairly, I mean. The election is so fracked up now in so many different places, and we now know for sure that there is voter fraud going on in so many places. I can't tell who actually won. And I'm not sure how you will ever tell who actually won. The only thing that I could see is a brand new vote carried out in a totally different manner than this one was. But that'll never happen because it would require action on the part of the House and the Senate, and they will never do anything like that. After stream hit you up for a 5-minute test, okay. Trump could declare martial law and nullify the election altogether. No, that would be really hard to do. That would not fly. That would not fly. If he tried that, there would be civil war. You have to me, you have to weigh a couple of things. What's fair versus what's likely to cause significant civil unrest. You know, when Nixon left office, right, he could have decided to stay. He could have done that. But to his credit, he said, no, I've lost all the support of the Republicans. I'm going to resign rather than have this turn into a giant debacle. It was a debacle on its own, but he did the right thing by saying, no, I'm not. He had just enough, integrity to say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to put the country through this. You have to always weigh that. Is it worth putting the country through potentially a civil war, or is it better to just let Biden have it? I don't know which the answer is. I just wish that we had an election that I could tell was fair and did not have rampant voter fraud. I'll tell you what, it is about 10 minutes before the hour, and my back is starting to hurt just a bit, regardless of the nice pillow that I have behind me that no doubt makes me look even fatter than I already am. So don't get me in one of those. Star Trek Discovery uniforms. I would look horrifying in one of those right now. Get me in Scotty's bomber jacket from Star Trek 3. That would be okay with me. Drop Truth, how about declaring war with another country? Worked for Clinton's impeachment proceedings? No, I don't think you need to do. No, declaring war would be no. It wouldn't help at all. It wouldn't help at all. How old is my chair? Honestly, no idea how old this chair is. I bought this because I had another one. It was an office desk chair higher backed than this one, but it had broken so that it was constantly leaning back on me. So I went to the Goodwill, and I found this one. I sat in it and went, okay, I can probably sit in this for a lengthy period of time, and I'm helping too because I have a pillow that seems to do wonders. Unfortunately, it sticks my stomach out more, but it does help my back. Blazer says North Carolina has hit 100% reporting for Trump. Why haven't they gone to him, Bill? who the hell even knows anymore? I can't tell anything about this. I just can't tell anything about it. It is so crazy that it is really, really hard for me to tell anything about it. It sounds like I need a new chair. Let's see what you can do. Well, there's the only kind of chair that actually helps for me. Found this out when I went out to this cabin here the last time. There's a recliner there. And oh man, you have no idea the amount of cleaning that I did in this place. Because what had happened was over the summer sometime, mice had gotten into the place, and my uncles had done all the repair work necessary to keep them out. But my God, did I clean that place. I cleaned that place like you would not believe. And my back got to hurting, sat down in this recliner and went, oh my God, that does my back a wonder of good. So the moment I got home, I went out to the Goodwill and I bought myself an inexpensive recliner that does wonders for my back. When I'm done here, that's where I'm headed. So Marshall says North Carolina is still tallying. Oh, mail-in voting received after deadline. I think the hard deadline is Friday. Okay. Well, that's what's going on. They're hoping to see mail-in ballots that go to Biden. And that's what's going on. Anyhow, I will probably drop off for the evening. Thank everyone very much. I very much enjoy having my audience. You guys are great. That is all that I got to say about that. So, as always, I'd love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I'll do my best to respond to you. So, that's all that we've got. Thanks for watching. That is all the time we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.